From the House of Representatives, February 27, 2024. Message number 4. Mr. President, the House of Representatives has completed consideration of Budget Bill Senate File 1, and in accordance with JR 14-1G, the bill has been referred directly to a conference committee. Suspending reading. Message number 167, February 27, 2024. Conferees appointed. Joint Conference Committee number 1. Mr. President, the House appointed House conferees to meet with the Like Committee number 1 from the Senate on amendments to Senate File 1. The House conferees are Representative Nicholas, Chairman, Representative Larson, Representative Sherwood, Representative Stith, Representative Walters. Message number 168, February 27, 2024. Mr. President, the House passed the following bills in an amended form. House Bill number 36, Natural Resource Protection Act, ayes 59, noes 2, excused 1. Message number 170, February 27, 2024. House Bill number 75, Public Property Amendments, ayes 55, noes 7. Message number 172, February 27, 2024. House Bill number 93, Animal Reimbursement Program Account Amendments 2, ayes 62. Message number 173, February 27, 2024. House Bill number 103, Property Tax Assessment Ratio for Residential Property, ayes 55, noes 7. Message number 174, February 27, 2024. House Bill number 134, Property Tax Deferral Program Amendments, ayes 44, noes 18. Message number 169, February 27, 2024. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third readings by the votes indicated. House Bill number 43, State Forestry Good Neighbor Positions, ayes 46, noes 15, excused 1. February 27, 2024, message number 171, House Bill number 86, Vehicle Lien Amendments, ayes 60, noes 2. Signed, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Reports from standing committees.
February 27, 2024, Mr. President, Committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 64, Fire Prevention and Electrical Safety Amendments, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Can we get Senator Nethercott, Senator Boner, and Senator Salazar to come up here? We're going to give certificates to your interns, and I'd just soon have you folks up here for it. So. They are. Bills on third read, or do we have some House files? Introduction of House bills. Introductory reading, House Bill 43.
House Bill 43, State Forestry Good Neighbor Positions, sponsored by SFARM. An act relating to state lands. Passed the House, ayes 46, noes 15, excused 1.
House Bill 43 is referred to Committee number 5, Agriculture. House Bill 86, introductory reading.
House Bill 86, Vehicle Lien Amendments, sponsored by Representative Brown. An act relating to personal property liens.
House Bill 86 is sent to Committee number 8, Transportation. Bills on third reading. Senate File 107, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 107, e-cigarette and vapor material directory, sponsored by Senator Landon, an act relating to taxation and revenue.
Message to the House, thank you for the cash. No. Senate File 107, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to speak a little bit on this bill and what's really happening here. I'd like people to look at the handout that's on your desks. It says states should enact a vapor directory to stop illicit sales. So I'll wait for everybody to grab that. If you look on the bottom right corner, you'll see a name and a logo. Well, I can't say the names of who that is, but there's a major company, tobacco company, that's tied to. That's the holding company. So let's just call it Big Tobacco. And they actually own a big industry section of inside of the vape industry. So what they're doing here is a nationwide push, state by state, to enact similar legislation because it gives someone an advantage. It gives the Big Tobacco advantage. And I want you to think about what's going on here. We're being told that adults have to be protected. A while ago, we were saying the adults can make decisions. Now we're saying this is a scary monster falling from the sky and we got to save everybody. I think adults can do their own research on this stuff. And look, I'm not going to say this to try to offend anybody. Even people on this bill, I think people had very good intentions when they got sucked into it by a lobbyist. But here's the term for regulatory capture. Regulatory capture definition. And I've omitted all the other words in this just so we can get it down to what's going on in this part of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is a form of corruption of authority that occurs when policymakers are co-opted to serve an industry player that is seeking to gain competitive advantage. That's what's going on. That's why you have a flyer on your desk that has a logo on it. That's the Big Tobacco Company. And if you look at the bill, you'll see right in the bill on page 2, it says by October of 2024 and annually thereafter, every manufacturer of these products will have to jump through all the hoops in this bill. And if we go down to the next, look at on page 2, line 14. Basically what it says here, if you've already been, if you've already jumped through all the federal hoops, that's what this section is here. The manufacturer has received a marketing authorization. That's basically you have to go to the feds and say, I want a marketing authorization so I can sell this product. So you've jumped through that hoop. Now you come to Wyoming, and now we got to take that marketing authorization and we got to start jumping through the state hoops. As we go on to the bottom of page 2, it mentions August 8th, 2016. Look how it says that. The electronic cigarettes or vapor material was marketed in the United States as of August 8th, 2016. So if you're one of those people that owns a company that has marketed these products since that date, why is that important in this bill? Because that's when the Fed started regulating it. The Feds already have regulations on this. As we go on to this bill, there's a punishment, $750. We're basically making our agency, we're making our revenue agency another cop that's on the street to go out and bust more people. Go down to bottom of page 3, it says you have to make sure you give up that certification from the feds, so a copy of the marketing authorization to the state, once again. Go on to page 4, a manufacturer is required to submit a certification. There you go again. On page 4, still on page 4, the department shall maintain and make publicly on their website a directory. So now we've got another form of government here at the state level. Again, another layer of government. As we go on, it says, the department on page 5, basically we're going to police FDA guidelines here, is what we're going to do on page 5.
Time, Senator. Time.
Has it been 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Damn, I went by fast.
Still got 5 more pages.
I'll get a second chance, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
will. Senator Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to help you out here, good senator from Cheyenne. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think he explained it very well. All I'll say is, prohibition laws here, especially one with a directory that, nobody really knows who's, dealing with that directory. You could be, have the wrong haircut and be put on that directory. So I'm on and against this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think it's good that these products be looked at by the FDA. I really do. It's important they be safe. It's important they don't have other chemicals. It's important they contain things that, maybe won't kill you right away. But and these products are frequently promoted as a safer alternative to cigarettes. So they're an important product to have. But the good senator is right that there's a bit of an arbitrary selection in this bill, and he was touching on it. And it's on page 2, on to page 3, it's that paragraph right there. And he's absolutely correct. You have to have been marketing stuff in the United States as of August 8, 2016. That's one criteria. The second criteria is that the manufacturer submitted a pre-market tobacco product application for the electronic cigarette or vapor material to the United States Food and Drug Administration pursuant to this law on or before September 9th, 2020. So if you submitted your application on September 10th, or maybe the next year, you don't qualify. Now, none of these people have received approval, Mr. President. This isn't about only allowing approved products on the list. Mr. President, this is about whether you snuck in and got your application into the FDA before a certain date. That's where the rub is, Mr. President, and that's why this is an unfair law from some competitors to try to keep other competitors out based on an arbitrary date when they submitted their application of almost 3.5 years ago. And there's been tons of applications since. They can't make this list, Mr. President, until the FDA actually gives their approval. And they are backlogged. There are thousands and thousands of applications in the backlog. This is an impossible thing for a competitor to get to. It's an arbitrary thing in the law, and we did not pass this bill.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Neither for or against, but I do think that this bill brings up an important consideration to think about and how complicated this issue is. And so, this is a regulation, which I think generally the majority of us in this room are against, and creates burdens on the market, which we all are generally against. I know I am. But what we do know, and kind of curiously, is who the failure to pass this bill, of what companies and what products and what countries are we actually helping? And so can anyone identify the source country for the majority of the products currently being sold in our state and whether or not they've been approved by our government for safe consumption, or whether or not they come from a foreign adversary. And I think we would be very troubled to know that you can buy those foreign adversary produced products that may or may not be unsafe in all of those communities, right? And so here we are in this conundrum, and it's just for purposes of debate and understanding that. I have grave concerns based on what the senator to my right has identified about really boxing out any potential future competitor. But there are legitimate concerns here about these products. And as we talk about other products similarly sold that we continue to see of THC generated or Delta 8 or other types of consumption-related products, we probably need to have a greater understanding of what those regulatory authorities look like as we move in that direction. So I appreciate the bringer of this bill. I appreciate the criticisms of this bill. All are valid. An important debate for this body to have in understanding the significance and ramifications of this bill, both to pass it and both the failure to pass it. Vote it up, vote it down, but it is a challenge for our state to address.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm reminded of words from my good friend who used to sit at the far corner a number of years ago. Some of my friends are for this bill and some of my friends are against it, and I'm with my friends. And I think we're definitely in that situation on this particular piece of legislation. Although, ironically, Mr. Chairman, I think what we find here is we've got conflicting interests where you've got bad actors on both sides that you want to be working against, right? On one hand, we have big tobacco clearly trying to seize the entire market for their own financial interests. That seems to clearly be true. On the other hand, we have foreign actors seeding the market with low-quality products that are not approved so that they can make money and lead to health risks for the people of our state and our country, and that clearly seems to be true. So it's a challenge, and what I regret, Mr. President, is that we've reached third reading before we've really gotten to the point where we've had this discussion, and I regret that. This would be a great one to lay back. This is the last day of third reading. We don't have that opportunity to provide a fix, and I think there are fixes, because I think the two good senators that identified a couple of paragraphs have really hit on the part that is the market capture that really is of concern. Mr. President, what I'm going to do is I'm going to vote for this bill with the hope that we'll have an opportunity in the other chamber to honestly strip out those two paragraphs. And I know my good colleague who's sponsoring this bill is listening at this point. I suspect he'll probably be willing to look to solve that problem. It would have been great if we could have done this the right way and had this debate on committee of the whole. We'd already be done. We'd have already solved it, honestly, I think, at this point in time. But I think the upside from the health and safety is urgent right now. That is something that is a near-term consideration that, for me, motivates me to pass this through and hope it gets fixed and we don't have the market capture as I weigh the two. But what I'm hearing is basically all the statements I find to be correct. I share the good senator from Laramie County's concern of the fact that it can kind of go either way, but maybe that's the way to thread the needle, is to have the good sponsor work over on the House side to address those problems and get us a better bill to vote on for concurrence.
Thank you, Mr. President. So there's a better way to do this. If you want to box out the bad guys, just make a simple bill that those countries' unapproved products can't be sold in Wyoming, $1,000 fine. That'd be simple. But what you're going to do with this bill, and I can assure you if you send it down to the other house, you're going to get a big piece of regulation. And what you're going to get is something that's going to look a 5-year lookout, and we're going to be saying, wow, we made another agency with a big sin tax on it, And we're gonna have to raise that tax just to keep it propped up. That's where it's going. That's where this is going. Remember, the big guys can afford all that. The little guys can't. Anytime you put fences up and you start doing this kind of legislation, it's bad. Don't try to make good legislation out of bad legislation. Just let it die. Let's start over next year. Thank you.
Senator Landon.
Well, Mr. President, thank you. I'm very happy to spice up this third reading a little bit.
I think he's spoken twice.
This is
Oh.
his first time.
Thank you.
First time.
My bad.
I hope that what I was trying to do, Mr. President, is wait for anyone who had concerns or questions. So if anyone does, I'd be happy to sit back down and try to be the last one up.
Think you
Are we
got it.
good? Okay, thank you, Mr. President. You know, folks, I agree with a lot of what's been said here today. This bill may not be perfect, but I will say that we worked it for a couple of months with our Department of Revenue. I have to take umbrage a little bit. One of the speakers indicated that I might have been sucked in by lobbyists. I assure you that doesn't happen here. This was all about, as your chairman of the Judiciary Committee, running across information that concerned me this past interim. We went out around the state to 3 different locations, and I heard it everywhere I went. And my thinking, Mr. President, was this is worth taking something on in this session. Why would we wait when we've got issues out there with this product? I know you've heard from folks about this directory. I would remind you, Mr. President and fellow senators, we do this now for tobacco. I provided for you a website where you can go there and you can see the 800 products that we list on a directory for regular tobacco products. We do it now. Our Department of Revenue goes out and checks all of our stores to make sure they're selling products that are approved. And that's for health risk. All this does is set up a parallel directory. Same thing. As of today, there would be over 1,500 products on that list. There's 800 on the tobacco list now. Mr. President, let's go over to alcohol. We check alcohol. There's been some bad products in the past, and so we have a registry list on alcohol. It's the same thing, and that's to protect our consumer. We actually had testimony in committee from the alcohol lobby saying, it works for us, it protects the consumer, you ought to do it for this product too. So, Mr. Chairman, regarding dates and box outs and whatever, this product is made by a lot of people, including some big companies. There's no doubt about that. The shift in some of those big companies was away from regular tobacco products to these products. So absolutely, they're on the market, and they've done it the right way. They've got the FDA approval, and the whole point of this bill is, if products are not approved by the FDA, then we ought to make sure they do get approved before we put them on this directory list. I testified to you before, fellow senators, these products are out there, and they've hurt some people. But the problem is our retailers don't know which ones are legal and which ones are not. We've got stuff coming out of that Pacific Rim nation that are dangerous, that are not even legal in that country, and they're shipping them over here. I think it is worth passing this bill and working it through the process. Your Judiciary Committee is going to be keeping an eye on this. I think we're going to have to revisit this fairly often going forward. There's a lot of products flying around out there, Mr. President. I think this is a good idea. It's been very well vetted by our agency. It's doable, and I think it's pretty easy, and I would give word that we will work it as it goes on down if it does, but I hope you'll support the bill. Thank you.
Senate file, ready for the question? Senate file 107, e-cigarette and vapor material directory. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 107, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? No. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 107, 17 aye, 14 no.
Senate file 107, e-cigarette vapor and material directory, having received the affirmative vote of the members elected to the Senate, Senate file 107 is passed the Senate. Senate file 110, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 110, School Finance Cash Reserves, sponsored by Senator Dockstader, an act relating to school finance.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in, please.
Senate File 110, third reading amendment number 1, delete.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 110 and would ask the body to vote aye. Senators, this has to do with the school finance cash reserves, and I just want to give you my recollection. When I was first elected to this wonderful chamber, this was something I remember learning about early on. And if you look at page 2 of the bill, you'll see that we really started doing this as a result after the Campbell decisions in the 1990s. And we decided that at the time, we would allow districts to keep up to 15% in their cash reserves. When I was elected, there was a lot of discussion about increasing that amount. And your joint education and your Senate education looked at numbers. We examined how many dollars were in each district's cash reserve accounts, looking at their total budget. And we rejected numerous requests to increase that cash reserve percentage. Then comes COVID. Then all of a sudden, our districts are starting to receive an influx of federal money through the various federal acts that Congress passed. And at the time, we were facing a pretty significant deficit in education funding. If you'll recall, we were looking at a 10% reduction to the school foundation program expenditures for school districts. And I remember this because the good senator over the hill said, we can't decimate our school districts. And I remember thinking, decimate seems like such a big word, a scary word. And he reminded me, decimate literally means to reduce by 10%. So this is why this sticks out in my mind, Mr. President. So we had this recognition that we have, declining revenues for K through 12 funding, this influx of cash from the federal government. And we thought, well, this might be an appropriate period to increase that ability for each school district to save up to 30% in their cash reserves, knowing that if we got out of this crisis and we still had the fiscal forecast that we were looking at, that districts, rather than fall off a cliff, would be able to use those reserves to gradually let themselves down to right-size their budgets again. So that's why you will see on page 3, the language beginning on line 14. For the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, through the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026, the department shall, and it says, allow for 30% cash reserves. We chose 2026 because we looked at how we do our biennial budgeting, and that would cover that period when we'd have all these extra revenues in place. And so it was to sunset after 2026. What this bill would do would be to remove that requirement at all, and it would change that percentage to 30%. forever. This was a really serious issue. I just think we need to be really cautious in how we address the problem and look at those reserves again. And I've asked for it. I said I would love to see those charts again. How much are in each district's reserves? How much are, what's their operating budgets? And I haven't seen anything. So what this amendment would do, Mr. Chairman, is rather than extend this in perpetuity, it would extend it for only 2 more years. That would allow our Joint Education Committee to look at this language again, to study the issue and make a better recommendation to us about whether or not we want to extend the percentage available for the reserves, indefinitely. So this is a compromise that I'm trying to work on. I will tell you that it's not supported by the bringers of the bill, but I would feel more comfortable voting for this bill if I knew we were going to look at this a little bit more in depth. So I'd ask your aye vote.
Further discussion, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've heard already from a couple of small schools. I think this is where the biggest problem I have with this amendment is many of them do have cash flow problems. We're not talking decimated, but when they got the ESSER funds and they were able to start building some reserves so that they could possibly get up to 30%, it really helped a lot of our smaller schools. And I think when you just arbitrarily say, well, you've had your fun and now let's in 2028, you're going to be back at 15%. I think what that does is I think it kind of encourages schools that sometimes have those cash flow, folks, they're going to have to spend down. What will that do in the short term? Nothing. But, long term is what we're kind of looking at. And, I think things could get tough. And I think it's better to be able to have that 30%. And some of the schools may not have been able to get to that mark. I don't know. I would like to have some of that data, but I do feel like at this time, the way it is, at least with my schools, small schools in my area, I would push off against this. So on and against the bill, the amendment.
Further discussion, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on and for the amendment, I think this is a thoughtful approach and prudent, and this is not as clear and clean of an issue, and we didn't really spend a lot of time in getting into the weeds on this particular bill about the other side of reserves. The other side of reserves in the Education Committee, we've looked at this a lot of times in the past. What's the right sizing of the reserve account? We do understand cash flow problems, and we've talked about that over the years. And in fact, we've had pieces of legislation that were very specifically trying to facilitate the cash flow by making sure that the payments were more appropriate and timely, and that there was availability of cash flow for districts that are the rebate districts that need that cash flow, as well as contemplating the timing for those recapture districts. So that has been the topic and subject of legislation. I think it's smoothed out, but it's clearly not perfect, and there's clearly a need for remedy for that. At the same time, Mr. President, when you fill your cash reserve, you're filling it at the expense of fully funding the school foundation program for the district. So any amount that goes into the reserve is a constitutional shortfall relative to what the model has determined is necessary to provide adequate education for that school district, based on the calculation, right? Mr. President, that's exactly what the calculation does. It's theoretically trying to calculate how much a school district needs for a given school year, and if you don't spend all of that, then you have intentionally spent short of the amount of money that's recommended pursuant to the model. So it's not clear-cut. With the receipt of the federal funds for COVID, we expected a massive influx that would lead to temporary receipt in excess of what the model would want, and therefore, at that point in time, the Education Committee was fully behind expanding it, recognizing that these were atypical funds. These were not funds that were through the funding model. As those have been spent down, it really is important to look at how the funds have been utilized, how much is needed in the cash reserves. And Mr. President, more importantly, if there really are remaining cash flow problems, the Education Committee needs to hear about those and contemplate appropriate policy responses that are aside from a cash reserve response, because that is not the appropriate use of the funds. They're not supposed to build up. They're supposed to be spent at any given time on the students. So, Mr. President, that's a long way of saying that this is a good amendment because it provides us the opportunity to contemplate all of these issues that we've looked at in the past, we haven't looked at recently, and we certainly haven't looked at since the COVID-19 funds that came into the state to understand the current situation. I think this is a good approach to make sure that we have to look at it to continue this or potentially adjust it in some other way.
Senator Hicks.
So, Mr. President, on and for the amendment, and I think my colleague, the minority floor leader, did a good job of explaining this. Again, these reserves weren't initially set up for that very purpose as a cash flow issue. We've worked on this issue of cash flow. There's other ways to get at this, and the reason that that's important, we have 48 school districts that operate at different levels with different level of reserves. And so rather than having 48 different programs out there potentially trying to save cash reserves for cash flow issues, we need to go back and look at what we've done in the past, because we dealt with this cash flow issue when they had 15% level of reserves. And we seemed to survive. Now, was it a good program? No, we did some things. We provided some borrowing authority and some transfers to the Department of Education to cover the block grant from some of our other funds. I believe it was the LSRA at one time to deal with this cash flow issue. But it's not just as simple as saying, just keep this now and use it for cash flow. There's a lot of other things, investment earnings, returns, consistency across all 48 school districts. I think this is a good amendment, and I think this is something that we probably ought to take up in the interim and start looking at this. If this is truly a cash flow issue, and particularly for small districts, as somebody that probably has as many as anywhere, some of the smallest districts in the state, it is an important issue. But to sunset this is a good thing to make us in the legislature come back and try to create a program that fits all 48 districts and meets the intent of the block model, as my colleague has indicated.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. These are all really good arguments, and there's a really good basis on both sides. In my district, I have 10 school districts. 5 of them are amongst the smallest in the state. And this 30% is critical for these small districts as compared to a district like this one. 30% of this district is huge. 30% of these real small districts is still not a lot of money. They need extra protection, and not extra protection, but they need stability long-term to know that they're going to have funds when there is a shortfall. When I think about communities like Shoshone or Matiti or Burlington, those schools are just running on the edge anyway. So on and against the amendment.
Further discussion. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, and frankly, I think the bill works with the amendment. I think the bill works without the amendment. Mr. President, the testimony we had in the Senate Education Committee focused really on the cash flow issues, and they did say that this extra reserve is very helpful in that, and that some of the districts were going to have to borrow money. That's an additional expense to meet some of the cash flow needs. So we need the bill either way. I think either way, this ought to be a subject to be looked at during the recalibration. This amendment would put us beyond that, so that makes it work. On the other hand, I do think there is value in having the districts have some reserves, and I'm nervous about some of the spending habits that the legislature has in general, that if we don't succeed in reining them in, we're going to be right back in not having enough money to fund our schools. And then some reserves at the school level are quite useful. So there's another factor in there that we didn't get any testimony on, but I think it is clear that we need to continue this for at least for the time being, because there are real cash flow needs, and we're going to need to deal with that. So, Mr. President, the bill works with the amendment, the bill works without the amendment.
Further discussion. Excuse me? Senator Ellis?
Mr. President, this would be my second time, if anyone wants to go before then.
Senator Dockstader in the corner. Thank you.
Let's get to the point here, folks. We're here because we got a couple of big school districts that spoke first. We got a lot of money. They're hearing from their teachers saying, why do we want the districts to be able to hide their money or not pay teachers more? That's why we're here. That's why this amendment is here today. It's not because of all the reasons that just got thrown out in front of you. This is how this amendment originated. We have a good bill. We have a system in place. This takes care of our medium and small districts. That's who I heard from, not one or two teachers worried about their future. I heard about districts trying to balance their budgets, trying to work and make it so they don't have to turn back and ask for short-term loans from the state. Multiple districts. You just heard from one of them from the center of the state. This bill creates an accurate and reliable cash flow system that they can go back, they can study it out, and they don't have to worry about yanking it back because of this sunset clause in there, this sunset rule. They need to have those projections in place to do their payroll. Don't take us back to a time when there's a spending frenzy because they felt like they had to hurry and get it spent before the sunset came. Let them have the option to plan their long-term future. If they need to, joint education can come in and adjust it. We don't need this amendment to help us do that. Don't take us back to a time when there's these spending frenzies. Let our districts manage themselves, just as you would want to with your own business. I do that. I budget long-term projections with my business for 40 years now. Made a payroll for 40 years now. Some of these speakers, if they made a payroll and run a small Wyoming business, I know what these districts are going through. For 40 years, I've sat through their school board meetings because of another occupation I've had. And I listen to them adjust those budgets and work about it. They're not about in a hurried frenzy to spend money. They're trying to run their district, make their payroll, and do it without short-term loans from the state. Multiple districts came back and asked me this. Just as you would want to run your business with some long-term projections, that's what they're asking. I've sat through all those meetings for years now. There's still a catch net. Joint education can come back, recalibration, and take care of it. They don't need this amendment to guide and direct them. They can handle it. I ask you vote against this amendment. Let's move forward. Let's give our districts, especially our small and medium districts, some operational room against the amendment.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President, for my second time. So this issue was actually raised to me by a teacher who is maybe looking at a reduction in force, and serious conversations are happening in my district right now. And that's really unfortunate because the whole discussion that we had in increasing the 15% to the 30% was trying to figure out a way to smooth that out rather than fall off the cliff. So some districts out there, I'm going to tell you, are probably looking at a cliff and they're going to lay off a lot of people, and that's serious. Okay. But think about the other things and how we try and direct education. And the good senator from Albany County is right. When we spend money, we always have these conversations. We look at how we spend money on CTE, for example, and we get really frustrated when we spend all this money on career technical education, but districts are only spending statewide on average about 65% of their budget on that. We get frustrated when we say, okay, we're going to do an external cost adjustment. We expect that money to go to teachers' salaries, and then we'll hear, oh, maybe it's, maybe padding administrative salaries. We get frustrated with these things. That's the whole point of having these dollars go where they want, is to fund the model and to fund things that we prioritize. So that's the concern, is rather than going to places where we want to see those dollars, they're being, by the districts decided to be put in these reserves. I'm trying to thread a needle here, and I would tell you, if without this amendment, I wouldn't be voting for this bill, simply because this is a compromise. This just buys us more time. All of these small districts that are relying on this extra money in their cash reserves to operate will have the opportunity to do that through June 30th of 2028. That's 4 years from now. That gives us time to look at this, to study it, and see if we can find a solution for all the districts, rather than just the small and medium districts. So if we were looking at trying to do what's right for all of our districts, I think buying some extra time to study it and having our education folks really look at it is the more prudent course. So I'd ask you to vote aye on this bill. or this amendment.
We're voting on third read amendment number 1 to Senate File 110. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Ayes have it. All in favor, please stand. The amendment is passed. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion? Senate File 110, School Finance Cash Reserves, have been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 110, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Murphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll? Aye. Dockstetter, aye to no? Hicks, aye to no. Nethercott, no. Rothfuss, no. Steinmetz? No. Jones? No. Kolb? No. Landon? No. Baldwin? No. Pappas? No. Murphy, no. Driscoll, no. Hutchings, no. Case, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 110, 12 aye, 19 no.
Senate File 110, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 110 has failed to pass the Senate. Senate File 114, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 114, Contractor Licenses, Reciprocal Recognition Requirements, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, an act relating to city, county, state, and local powers.
There is an amendment. We have the amendment read in, please.
Senate File 114, third reading amendment number 1, page 3, lines 4 through 7, delete.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 114. Ask the body's favorable consideration. Mr. President, this was discussed on an earlier reading, and it addresses the concerns that were raised. There were basically 3 concerns that were raised by stakeholders. We see in the first part of the amendment some requirements for the accepting jurisdiction shall recognize the license under this section requires that the contractor's license shall be active. That was existing language. But the B provision was based on a request and concern from Southwestern Wyoming Senator about the contractor shall be in good standing with the issuing jurisdiction and shall provide to the accepting jurisdiction any proof of financial assurance that includes both bonding and insurance as necessary. by the accepting jurisdiction. So that gets at the financial assurances that were requested to ensure that an accepting jurisdiction could have oversight of appropriate insurance and bonding. The Romanet 2 edition changes some language to make it clear that the standard that will be set for reciprocity includes kind of the gold standard that's currently used in the state of Wyoming, where a contractor shall provide proof of the successful completion of the International Code Council examination for contractor plumbing, mechanical, or other appropriate examination. And then the later half talks about circumstances of fire-related, whether that's American Sprinkler Association, fire engineering technologies, et cetera. So this gets to what are used currently as the gold standard licensing that our association that oversees municipalities looks to as well, and it provides the assurances that were requested. So, Mr. President, I believe this addresses all of the concerns that have been raised by stakeholders to ensure that the reciprocity was an appropriate reciprocity where high-quality standards would be utilized throughout.
Thank you. Further questions? Further questions? Question being called. We're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 114. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Third reading amendment 1 to Senate File 114 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Senate File 114 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 114, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Conflict? Thank you. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? No. Kolb? Conflict? Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Barlow? Aye. President Driscoll? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 114, 27 aye, 2 no, 2 conflict.
Senate File 114, having received the majority vote of the majority of the members, elect the Senate. Senate File 114 has passed the Senate. Senate File 118, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 118, Bighorn and Domestic Sheep Relocation Federal Action, sponsored by Senator Hicks, an act relating to wildlife and livestock.
There is an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate File 118, third reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 9, delete.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 118 and ask for your favorable consideration. Just to give you a little background again, the state of Wyoming is interested in potentially reintroducing bighorn sheep into the Sweetwater Rocks area in the state of Wyoming. There's some concerns with the number of the grazing permittees in that area up there that potentially bighorn sheep could be used as a surrogate method to either eliminate domestic sheep grazing or reduce domestic livestock amount of federal AUMs. So what the amendment does is go in on page 2 line and provide some clarifying language that's more consistent with the actual application on the ground as it exists today. It just gets rid of the word throughout the state and inserts the conservation and maintenance of healthy bighorn sheep populations. The next section, we deleted entirely. That was part of the legislative findings. Renumbers, we bring in a new section of legislative findings on Romanet number 3, and it just makes clear that if there is any removal associated with this act, this bill, that the mechanism for removal will not be associated with domestic livestock grazing on public lands. It'll be a result of federal regulations that unduly impede the state's ability to manage our wildlife and domestic livestock grazing in conformance with Wyoming's Bighorn Domestic Sheep Plan. We codified that plan in 2015. It has worked for the state of Wyoming. And so we're just saying, look, if in the event that they're removed, it's not a result of any action of any permittee or the state, it's because of a federal action. The other alternative, which could potentially trigger a removal, would be third-party litigation designed to use bighorn sheep as a means to eliminate domestic livestock grazing on BLM-administered lands in the Sweetwater Rocks Cooperative Review Area. That's just in the legislative findings. We get down in there, this is again more clarifying language when we get to page 4, line 2 through 6. It's existing section, it's just to provide a little broader encompassing language to make sure this is the trigger. This is what would result in the removal of bighorn sheep, and it just says any change to any United States Bureau of Land Management resource plans, grazing allotments, or grazing agreements due to the presence of bighorns in the Sweetwater Rocks, that would trigger the start of the removal. So that we get into the next section in the amendment, it changes the determination, who determines that the trigger has been met. Before it was Game and Fish Department. It was felt like the Department of Agriculture is more connected with grazing allotment issues. So it would be the Wyoming Department of Agriculture would certify to the governor that the triggers happen, and then the governor makes the final decision as to move forward with removal or not. Mr. Chairman, we move down, you see a new subsection D, E, and F. That's just clarifying existing, and D, that is existing Game and Fish Department policy. People wanted to see that encompassed here. Policies change from year to year, administration to administration, to make sure that we had consistency moving forward. E is just says the state and its agencies will continue to work with our congressional delegation in changing federal laws, rules, and policies in order to bring them into conformance with Wyoming's Bighorn Domestic Sheep Plan. And then F is another provision for the Game and Fish Department shall not seek to change or alter any grazing permits. This is existing department policy again, and we're just memorializing that in the statute. Stand for any questions. If there is no questions, I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions? See, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. When we heard this bill in committee, there were a number of requested amendments by the bringer of the bill, and then some additional people in the room testifying. And even since this third reading amendment has been out in the public sphere, I've had more people sending me emails asking me to just inquire if this bill's quite ready for prime time. It's a really important issue. I'm glad we're discussing it. But I've got an inbox with a couple of emails saying, I think we need these amendments. And so with all due respect, I just want a discussion on, is this worth something that we should be spending a little time on in the interim, or is it ready to go as it is? But I can tell you I'm hearing concerns.
We'll try to answer those questions. So this actually came pretty late in the process, but it is something that has been in ongoing negotiations for several years. And so we have what we call the Bighorn Domestic Sheep Working Group that meets once a year, usually in mid-December. This come up at that meeting, and that is a collaborative that involves all the federal agencies, any of the NGOs, wildlife conservation organizations, state agency. It's chaired by the Wyoming Department of Agriculture, the state veterinarian, and the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So they have been looking at this issue for 2 or 3 years now and trying to work this, and they could not find a workaround dealing with some potential BLM regulations. And so this came up as a discussion topic in that mid-December meeting. It took a number of time for the different groups, meaning the wild sheep advocates and the wool growers and stock growers, to have meetings and discuss it. So we ended up having a draft in January that went out for all those reviews. So we're still trying to get all the participants in that to weigh in on this. This was sent out to some of the major members of that group for their review and input. But it is important that we continue to move this forward. This is an effort that's gone on for 3 or 4 years now. This starts to pave the way for these discussions and potential. I say potential because we still don't know if in fact that there will be an introduction, but certainly it's been something that the state of Wyoming, the agencies, the affected interests, the non-government entities, and the livestock permitting has been discussion for a number of years. So this is a little bit of a fluid situation, but it has addressed something that came up late in the process, and I would hope we could move this forward. It's pretty important to the people of the state of Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
We're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 118. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 118 is passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Senate File 1, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I've heard loud and clear from my constituents in Jeffrey City. I'll be a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I went back and looked through all my emails before this came back up. I did have one negative, but the rest of them were positive, felt like this was something that would be good. And many of those that I got were from people who own sheep, and they basically didn't feel like this was going to be an issue the way it was set up. I think the amendment really makes the bill even better because I think it kind of puts to bed some of the issues that people have with not having the trust of our federal partners and that sort of thing. So I think the amendment makes this even a better bill than it was, and I would urge your adoption of the bill.
Thanks, Senator Schuler, for the comments. Seeing none. Senate File 118, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 118, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 118, 27 aye, 4 no.
Senate File 118, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elect to Senate, Senate File 118 is passed the Senate. Senator Salazar and Senator Boner, can you come up and we'll do the presentations? We're about to lose aides if we don't get it right after it, so. Yours. You. I've already gave you a point.
Yeah, I've got one too.
All right. You guys want to say a couple words, and your aides can say a word or two, and we'll go on. I'll turn the mic on for you.
Mr. President, thank you. Members of the Senate, I want to introduce you to a young man who's been so incredibly indispensable to not only myself, but other senators. My legislative aide for the last 2.5 weeks, Mr. Joseph Martinez, who's from Riverton, has been extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. He has escorted my constituents, guests over the last 2.5 weeks. He's given even tours of the Capitol. He's actually arranged interviews for me, including a national network interview last week. That was Joseph's doing. And he's helped in requests that constituents have asked when I've been in committee. And he's a young man who I really believe is going to have a bright future in government. And so with that, Mr. President, if the Senate could give a warm thank you to Joseph Martinez from Riverton.
Well, thank you very kindly, members of the Senate. President Driscoll. I figured I might say a few words. I might not be as eloquent as the Democratic minority leader or as wise as our longest-serving senator. However, I will do my best. I do have principles, and I'm just going to share a few of my principles and a few of my missions for my life here on earth. My first principle is God. I believe that I should serve and worship Him as best as I can. And I have a list of second principles: wisdom, faith, love, responsibility, integrity, freedom, discipline, and gratitude. I may add to that list later on in life, but I don't think I'll take away from that list of principles. My ultimate mission in life is to make the world a better place. I will start by improving myself every day. Through an improved and enlightened self, I will share love and wisdom to those around me. I will encourage those around me to do their best as well. So with that, I will please encourage you guys to do your best for the state of Wyoming. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure you've all seen Casey working hard on the floor for the most of his time here. It's been an absolute honor to have him helping me out. And I can say I've got a lot more blog posts than I've ever done before because of his work, and in addition to consistent social media presence. So that's been real nice. Thank you for all that. But the best part, for me at least, is just seeing Casey's diligence, his interest in our government, his dedication to our state. And if bright young men like him are willing to stick around Wyoming and make it better, I think the future is much brighter. And it's really, it's inspired me to do better work. So thank you, Casey. Hopefully we'll see you around a little bit more someday. And appreciate all the work that you've done for all of us here in the Wyoming Senate. So thanks again.
Now, I didn't prepare anything special, so you're going to get what I can come up with here in about 30 seconds. I thank each and every one of you for your encouragement during these past couple of weeks. Sitting and listening to each and every one of you speak on the different topics each and every one of you are interested in has been such a life-changing perspective that it's less about the party and more about the problem. So I thank each and every one of you for helping me concrete the idea that someday I want to serve in this very chamber. And I thank each and every one of you all for the service you do to this state. Thank you very much.
Many thank you to both of you. Really been a pleasure to have you here. Senate File 132, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 132, American Rescue Plan Act Appropriations Amendments, number 4, sponsored by Senator Kolb.
There is amendments. Can we have them read in, please?
Senate File 132, third reading amendment number 1, corrected copy, page 32, line 1, after.
Senator Kolb.
Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 132 and ask for your favorable consideration. This is a pretty simple amendment, maybe the shortest one of the day. It merely states that this act, if it passes, in particular this body, shall be given precedence and shall prevail over any other act, I can't hardly read, excuse me, Mr. President, by the Wyoming legislature during the 2024 budget session. And that is the purpose. This ARPA bill in front of us has been worked through the process in this body, and I think that should speak enough about why we should support this change, so we don't have any conflicts towards the end as it works through the process. And I ask for your aye vote on this amendment.
Further discussion, further discussion. Seeing none, we're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 132. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 132 has passed the Senate. We have another amendment. Could we have it read in, please?
Senate File 132, third reading amendment number 2, page 28, lines 1 through 19 in.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 132. Ask for your support. We were playing around with the idea of where do we want that money to have priority? And finally, we settled on the idea that we have health and human services, essentially our health care in the state, and our water. Both are very important. So with this amendment, we put them on equal footing and ask for your support when they go to consider where these funds should go. Healthcare and water are a priority. Thank you for your support.
Further discussion, seeing none. We're voting on third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 132. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 132 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Question being called. Senate File 132 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 132, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstader? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Hutchings? Aye to no? Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 132, 23 aye, 8 no.
Senate File 132, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 132 has passed the Senate. Senate File 54, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 54, homeowner tax exemption, sponsored by the Revenue Committee, an act relating to taxation.
Has amendment. Can we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate File 54, third reading amendments number 1, page 2, lines 5 through 10, delete.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 54 and urge the body's favorable consideration. So folks, this the primary change that's made here is to go from a percentage exemption to a dollar exemption. So, and we've gone through quite a few amendments, so let me tell you, overall, when we're done on this amendment, if it passes, this is what happens. The sunset stays. It would go from 25.6 to a flat 200 on all residential in the first year, primary residence occupied in the second year and subsequent years. There is a backfill, because I understand from the Department of Revenue and the assessors that to make this effective immediately in 2024, there has to be a backfill. I know some folks don't care for that, and I've got my own reservations, but on balance, I want this thing to be effective immediately. So I'd like to walk you through, so on the amendment itself, you'll see lines 5 through 7, that's the 200,000. And then lines 11 through 22, that's the backfill. Page 3, line 2, I'll have to look at what line 24 does. But let me take you through some exhibits. The first exhibit is an illustration of what a percentage exemption does versus a flat $20,000, $200,000 exemption. It's a table showing values for starting at a $150,000 home down to $1 million home. Current tax on a $150,000 home, $980, with a percentage that goes to $729. With the flat 200, goes to 0. $200,000 home, current tax $1,300. With a percentage, it gets reduced to $972. With the 200 flat, it goes to 0. A $250,000 home, current tax $1,600. With a percentage exemption, that tax falls to $1,200. With the 2,000 flat, it goes to $327. And so on down the line. At $1 million home, it's a $6,500 tax reduced to $4,800 and $5,200. The effect kind of disappears as you get to the bigger home. The real effect is in the vast majority of homes. Our service office estimates that this would make 46% of all residential properties, including land, less than or equal to $200,000. They'd pay no property tax. 46% property tax free. On the other side, we have the fiscal impact. So the school foundation fund, the 12 mills the state collects, $45 million in the first year, because it's all homes. Then the ad valorem tax, the local taxing entities, $97 million. And the school foundation fund, that's collected by the districts, $116 million. The 45 and the 116 you have to backfill anyway. Then there's the 97 to local authorities. That figure, 258, well, it looks like a big number, but I've seen us blow through that much money and more in the legislature. And this is the taxpayers' money. So let me share with you that since 2019, residential property tax collections by the state have gone by 84%. 84%, far faster than the pace of inflation. They're on pace to hit by 2026, $750 million, $750 million. So the first year of this, the 258, is giving back to the taxpayers roughly a third of that bonanza that the state has experienced. And the subsequent years, 187 to 188, is giving back roughly a quarter of that bonanza that has been experienced by government. So it still leaves the government ahead of money, but it not only does it reduce taxes going forward, but most importantly, it gives back for the hit that people have taken over the last several years. So with that, I would urge your favorable consideration and ask the bodies, see if there's questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Is there any questions? Seeing none. We're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 54. This will be a roll call vote.
Third reading amendment number 1, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Murphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinsky? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll? Aye. Hicks, aye to no. Guru, aye to no. Ellis, aye to no. Larson? No. Cole? No. Ide? No. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 54, third reading amendment number 1, 24 aye, 7 no.
By your vote, third reading amendment number 1. By your vote, third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 54 has passed the Senate. There's another amendment. Could we have it read in, please?
Senate File 54, third reading amendment number 2, page 2, after line 23, insert.
Senator Kinsky.
Mr. President, absent objection, I would ask that Senate File third reading number 2 to Senate File 54 be withdrawn.
Without objecting, third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 54 has been withdrawn. We're back on the bill. Any more discussion? Senator Nethercott.
President, thank you, Mr. President. I just know that many of us weren't necessarily part of some of the working groups, and I know there was concerns about the impact of this critically important piece of legislation to our counties, cities and towns and schools. And so that was a requested piece of information to be provided to all of us. I see a couple different charts here, but I think it'd be helpful for the body and for the public to understand the bill now as amended. What is the estimated impact to counties, cities, towns, and schools in 24, 25, 26, if we have that estimated number? And so what would be the anticipated or potential ask for backfill that the state may be asked to find, either in the supplemental or in the years to come? So if we could get the fiscal impact to our cities, towns, and counties and schools as a result of the action that we just took before we vote on the bill, I think that'd be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think, well, I've got some reservations on this bill. I will vote for it because I know we need to provide some tax relief to our folks. My biggest concern, though, is I am glad there's a sunset, but when we do sunset it, we're going to give folks for a couple of years, the lower priced homes, they're not going to be paying any tax. And my concern is that these folks will really have an impact when it does sunset and they go back on the tax rolls. I know that's probably the logical thing to do. However, taking people off the tax rolls completely and where they have no skin in the game, I don't know that that's very healthy. I know we're looking at tax relief. I think this is probably the best we're going to do this year. So like I said, I'll probably vote yes, begrudgingly a little bit, because I don't really think it's ready yet because of the issue that we're completely taking a big majority of people that'll pay no property tax for a couple of years, so they have no skin in the game. And then, after a couple of years, they're gonna start paying property tax again, and I think we're gonna have a lot of issues with people complaining about that. So, just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'll also reluctantly support this, but I will back it up by saying I will support what we need to do once we find out that we sold the shop. And now it's going to come time to pay the piper and deal with people that are going to have to pay property tax again in that eventuality. I think this is going to be devastating to my county if it's not backfilled. And I think if we backfill it, they're going to have consequences that go way beyond what this will do. I think it's going to be a problem. This may be the easy way out right now, but I can assure you it's probably not the most thought out way out. I think that we are trying to solve a problem, and we're using a sledgehammer to solve the entire state's issue, and we don't have an entire state of equal issues. I can assure you we didn't have a 20% run up in property taxes for residential properties in Sweetwater County. I assure you it didn't happen. So the thought that everybody's in the same boat is simplistic, and we're not. You know, our makeup is heavily industrial and very light and residential for revenue for our particular county, but there are parts of the county that derive revenue from this revenue stream that are going to have to figure out what to do if it's not backfilled, and it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. I mean, I'll do the right thing, but and I won't bother to say I told you so, but I'll do what I need to do. It's just not going to be easy, and so reluctantly I support this, and I just wanted to give those words out before I vote, Mr. President, and thank you for the opportunity.
Further comments? Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we're on thin ice when we try to do indirectly through an exemption what we can't do directly because of the Constitution. Constitution puts out the arrangement between the classes of property and does give the legislature the ability to have exemptions. You know, what's the boundaries on those exemptions? Well, in my mind, some of them are things that are already in the Constitution, like necessary support of the poor. And, you know, that gives more tightness to any exemption that we would make should we go to survive a court challenge. This is like, you know, various different bills that move on to be challenged is that part of the Constitution says one thing, and then part says another. So we have these tiers, but we can create exemptions. But the court's going to look at that and they say, you know, the exemptions weren't meant to undo those tiers. That is the basics of it. When the people passed this constitutional and those tiers, they were coming to a rough compromise between various economic elements in our state: minerals, industrial, commercial, and other property. This is the compromise they came up with. You know, and if we don't, that's why we put a constitutional amendment in to allow the legislature to create another tier. So there's that problem that we're trying to do indirectly, which we cannot do directly because we'd have to change the Constitution. But this bill is just clunky. To give everyone this break, second homes and everything, no matter, without criteria, so you can get it out the door fast, is bad thinking, Mr. President. You know, and we're all saying, well, this is going to get to a baseline program after we get this initial piece out of the way. Why don't we just have a bill that deals with the baseline after it's thought out? Why do we throw that windfall out that probably, you know, 35%, I'm told, of the valuation of homes in Wyoming is in one county, you know? Well, God bless them, and they'll enjoy this, Mr. President, and so will a lot of other people that don't even live here full time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I had a number, as you do, as many of you honorable members have had, a number of town hall meetings last year. This was the number one issue in my town halls. And this provides immediate tax relief for my constituents in Fremont County. And to those of my constituency who are listening now, this fulfills my promise to you for immediate property tax relief in my constituency. There are other tax bills coming down, and I will look at them. I'm inclined to favor them because I know how much my constituents are hurting. And so the bottom line is I will support this because it does provide immediate tax relief, particularly for those who are hurting in my district. And thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you. Really appreciate the good words this afternoon on what I consider, I agree with my friend from Fremont County. I think this is probably our top issue. I don't know if I went the right way on that amendment. I will tell you that I think it does a little bit better for our lower income population, which I think we should be about. I worry, Mr. President, about next year when we get back down here. I'm hopeful that we can stay on the rails until we can get down here and evaluate what we've done. I think this whole premise of trying to get some immediate relief to our people, I'm like many of the rest of you, my constituents have gotten hit hard. And no matter what, I want to be able to take some relief back to them. But I do worry about the precedent that we're setting here and whether or not we can get out from underneath. You know, you start backfilling, you've got your hands full, and we've got our hands full. I'm going to support the bill, particularly because it's got a sunset on it. I think that's critical so that we can all make sure we didn't blow a hole in the bottom of the boat and sink this thing. I'll be watching carefully, but I plan to support the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill, and I just want to take a moment to thank everyone in this room for helping out. This started out as a couple years ago, personal bills, then it turned into the committee bill, and the Joint Revenue Committee took this up over the interim and spent countless hours on this. As chairman, I spent, I don't even know how many hours on this bill or on other bills. Is it clunky? Maybe, but we've put so much work into this. We're trying to build consensus with everybody in this room, all sides of the aisle, all different viewpoints, all different hands on deck, because it is an all hands on deck bill. It's not just one person's bill, it's all of our bills. And I think we've landed on a pretty good place. This is significant tax relief for people. What we've done with this bill is significant. I think our constituents will be very happy. We'll be back in 10 months. Our Good Appropriation Committee, I can't read lips, sorry. Our Good Appropriations Committee will come back and take a look at the financials here in 10 months on a supplemental. I think we're in a good place. I urge you to support this bill. And we're not done yet. The House or the other end of the House or the other end of the building will have their input on it as well. But I encourage you to stick with the process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill. And I do appreciate the good revenue chairman and his approach in trying to engage everybody. Conversation I had with him a few days ago was actually that, in my view, we needed to really focus on the hardworking people of the state that needed tax relief directly, and that at that point in time, I thought that a baseline residential homestead exemption was the best approach to do that. And here it is. Here is that opportunity to vote for that homestead exemption. And I'm going to, Mr. President. I will tell you, I'm a little nervous. I appreciate the backfill. We've got the backfill. That was one of the other things I thought was critical. My concern in the long run is revenue. This is a substantial decrease in revenue for the state. I think it's good public policy as structured. But at the same time, we are going to have to be cautious, and we're going to have to keep an eye on our revenue. And we might have to come back and think about what we did here and whether it's appropriate in the long run. But at this point in time, Mr. President, we can't afford it right now. And at this point in time, this is, in my opinion, the appropriate option, the appropriate path to put money back in the hands of the people that really need it, people in our community that are working hard, and this does that directly. And we've also had, as one of our primary issues, affordable housing, and recognizing that we want to get young families to be able to stay in the state of Wyoming and to be able to afford homes. And this makes those homes more accessible because it decreases the out-of-pocket specific to those homes. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I'll support this legislation.
Further discussion? Senator Nethercott.
Concerned that maybe folks in the room would be voting on something they don't understand the financial impact of. I know that all of you know, but, and this is just information provided yesterday. I'm not sure if our LSO staff has been able to update the information, but my understanding of the financial impact of the bill for 2025 would be a loss of revenue of $260 million for just 1 year. And so to the school foundation fund, that would be $45,200,000. Ad valorem tax, $97 million, and the school foundation fund, $116 million. In 2026, that goes up to about $260,400,000. I'm just using this based on information previously provided to me by the bringer of the amendment before about the impacts. And so I just want to be clear. I know we've kind of broad brushed it of we love to throw these numbers around, and certainly this session, my gosh, we've had hundreds of millions of dollars just thrown around in that budget. This is different. This is $260 million that I anticipate, and of course it's up to this body, to be an ongoing expense of the government, of the state, to backfill these funds. And of course, we are likely going to have to do that as it relates to the education funding piece. Our counties and cities may not be quite so lucky, but as we deal with the next bill coming about local distributions, of course, that ask no doubt will be higher as a result of this, and the struggle will continue for our cities and counties. So this is a really big decision. The sunset means nothing. I don't anticipate there will be the will of the body to put a property tax back on people who have a home of less than $200,000. I think that is highly improbable, and so important to have a really realistic understanding of that piece. I do believe that we need property tax for the people of Wyoming. I'm concerned that we did not do the necessary work and fully understand the impacts of this and the other pieces of legislation before we commit the legislature to a challenging situation in the next decades to come. In response to comments from the senator from Laramie County on second reading on this bill, I think is important. I'm not sure if we're actually hitting the right population for property tax relief. So if we recall, we have a number of property tax relief programs, primarily for the poor and those that may own a home less than $200,000. But we know that this challenge hit with property taxes is a result of an increase in home values. And some of those increase in home values just seem surprising based on what they've historically been valued at. And so that likely affects those on fixed incomes, of course, but those that do own homes and are likely considered the working poor, right, that may not be feeling the relief from this property tax option as others, because this really focuses on the poor, where we already have some of those alternative options available. I know in Laramie County, you would be really hard pressed to find a family home less than $200,000. And so I'm not sure that is providing a lot of meaningful relief to Laramie County homeowners. Certainly, it will provide some. And there are, and I'm hopeful that it will. I'm hopeful that they'll also be eligible for the property tax refund program as well. I look forward to continuing this conversation, but I do have real concerns, want to express those. I support our efforts, but I'm a little disappointed with where we are at this point. I think it's perhaps unwise.
Further discussion? Question being called. Senator Hicks.
If I may, and I got to tell you, I'm a little proud of the Senate. This has been a struggle for 2 years. This isn't perfect. Certainly, this is a big issue and we need to deal with it. But Mr. President, I'm going to explain a little bit of my vote on this. Well, I've always tried to come down here and represent the interests of the state. I was elected by local people that have not experienced the rate of property tax increase that many of you around the state. It's a real problem. We're starting to see it a little bit in the district that I represent in Carbon and Sweetwater County, but it's certainly not beyond the realm of what the nation and the statewide average has been. Mr. President, the other thing that I'm having a little bit of struggle with at this point in time is when we eliminated the language of the primary resident. Now I have property in 2 counties and 3 different properties that I'm going to get property tax relief on all 3 of those. And I don't know how that helps the people that are really, we got rid of the primary residence language in there because we needed to get this done this year. So now it's, if you're a residential property owner like me and have 2 or 3 different residences in different counties around the state, I'm going to get those rebates at all 3 counties. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can vote for that. I don't think that's equitable. And so I think this is the best product that we could have come up with given the constraints that we have. I'm proud of the product. But at this point in time, I have to represent my constituents and I have to represent my conscience. So I'm going to be a no vote on this.
Further discussion. Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hats off to the chair of the Revenue Committee. I think your work actually spanned 2 interims on tax reform. Still looking for that perfect bill, and if you produce it, you get an award. But this is a PGL, pretty good legislation. We failed last year because we were looking for the perfect bill that was immune from constitutional challenge. Couldn't find that one. This one, though, the exemptions are of longstanding recognition. We have a veterans exemption. It's not income qualified. Exemptions are well established. Is there a chance of a challenge? Yeah. As my sister used to say, anybody can file a lawsuit. All it takes is $25 and a typewriter. And I said, Robin, you don't even have to have the typewriter anymore. You can just handwrite the petition. If you're in prison, they'll take it. The break for everybody, I'd emphasize, is only in year 1 for the immediacy. There is a backfill. I want my colleague from Sweetwater County to know that there is a backfill there. And as for the financial impact, there was an updated table distributed to the floor that showed a lesser impact than what was yesterday. Yesterday was on a higher exemption, 300,000. And so the impact the first year, flat, for all residences, so we can make this immediate, is 258 million. Subsequent years, 187 million. Or roughly, first year, 1/3 of the total residential property tax collections, the run-up to 750 million. And in subsequent years, about 1/4 of the run-up. So really what we're doing is telling property owners, we're giving you back a little bit of what you lost in most of the state where the run-up in values, and so others will benefit as well. Okay, I'm sorry. It's rare that I have to be told to speak up, so thank you. Part of the reason for the hustle on this is our failure last year. We managed to put an increased credit out, but to get that credit, You had to go online, fill out an application. That was a problem for some of my constituents. Get your income tax returns, reveal all your assets, and show that you qualified. And that really did not abate the rage that is out there over the run-up in property taxes. So here we are. There's some compromises in this bill, some things we don't like, but the main thing is let's get people the relief that they really need and want. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I hate to do this, but I could not hear the specific figures on the impact this year and next year. If those could be repeated, and if you could speak a little closer into the microphone, be helpful.
Thank you, Senator Kinski, absolutely. Yep, you've got relief. Step up and make your talk. I'll even turn your mic on.
Thank you. Tax year 2024, $258 million. That's all residential property. Tax year 2025, $187 million. Only primary residence occupied. 2026, $188 million. 2027, $189 million. The total residential property tax collections, Senator, $750 million. It's a run-up from 300 million, or excuse me, a run-up of over 330 million since 2019. Thank you.
Further comments? Further comments? Hearing none, question being called. Senate File 54, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 54, third reading roll call. Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. No. Cooper. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Ellis. Aye. French. Aye. Furphy. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks. No. Hutchings. Aye. Ayed. Aye. Jones. Aye. Kinski. Aye. Kolb. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. President Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 54, 29 aye, 2 no.
Senate File 54, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 54 has passed the Senate. That completes third reading. Senator Guru.
Privilege of the floor, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the 67th, today, in the last couple of days, we've had representatives from around the state of our number 2 industry, the hospitality industry. Today at their luncheon, one of our own was given the highest honor that our industry can bestow on one of its own. And a very, very fitting winner it was. Good friend of mine, as a matter of fact, from my hometown. Jim Waldrop is, like I say, been a good friend. He's been a hotelier. He's been a model citizen, been an airport board member. He's been on more committees and more different things. We've cut in Jackson Hole so many events out of whole cloth. Old West Days, they're called, the Fall Arts Festival. Just made events up out of thin air. And now they're some of the most well-attended events in the state. And he's been at the center of every one. He's a good friend of ours, a good friend of everyone in the state. And I'd like to introduce him right here. He's sitting with me, Jim Waldrop, ladies and gentlemen.
Here, here.
Here, here.
If you've ever sat on a saddle at a world-famous bar, or saddled up in front of a bar that's covered with silver dollars, you might have been at one of his establishments. So, he's done great things for Wyoming. Thank you so much, Jim, for everything. Proud to know you. So, folks, on your desks are the appointments for the governor. Everybody needs to go through those. Majority Floor Leader will be calling a caucus at some point to go downstairs, so go through the appointees, take a look, see what you like, don't like, and we'll caucus at some point on those, but everybody needs to take a good look at them. Do we have some committee reports, Randy?
February 27th, 2024. Mr. President, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred House Bill 9, Fuel Tax Licensee Information Deadline, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator Beitman, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business.
Mr. President, we've been going at this about 2 hours, so how about we stand at ease to the sound of the gavel and give staff a little break here?
So ordered. Stand at ease. Come to order. We're going to go into Cal, but first we're going to announce the joint committee assignments for the budget. Kinski, Chair. Salazar, Senator Larson, Senator Bouchard, Senator McCuen, excuse me. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, with that order of business.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
And I don't know who's coming to the desk. Senator Ide.
Committee of the Whole, please come to order. Let's see. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 81. The reading clerk will read the House bill.
House Bill 81 engrossed, Public Officer Training Amendment, sponsored by Representative Banks, an act relating to administration of government.
You've heard the bill. You've heard the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I may have to ask for this to be laid back. I don't know if we have, my apologies, but I don't know who's working this bill on the floor.
Just lay it back.
If we could, Mr. Chairman, if we could just lay this back one or two, I'll be ready to present it. I did not realize we didn't have anybody on the floor, so.
Thank you, Senator Landon. We'll lay it back.
Requested it be laid back.
Thank you. Let's see. The next bill for consideration is House Bill 15. The reading clerk will read the House bill.
House Bill 15, Health Insurance Reimbursement of Overpayment, sponsored by the Labor Committee, an act relating to health insurance.
You have heard the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Baldwin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with an affirmative recommendation on House Bill 15, health insurance reimbursement of overpayments. For explanation of this fine bill, I turn to the better senator from Lincoln County, Senator Dockstader.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you House Bill 15, health insurance reimbursements, overpayments. So members of the Senate, currently Wyoming health insurance companies have 10 years to request overpayments from healthcare providers and hospitals on past claims. These same healthcare providers have timely been filling the requirements of 1 year to complete the billing after the treatment. We heard in testimony that we had a situation in Wyoming where an insurer claimed 8.5 years of overpayment on a certain procedure, requiring hundreds of thousands of dollars of paybacks from this providing hospital. We heard in committee that most states have limits of 1 to 3 years for health insurance reimbursements of overpayments. Hospitals are operating on narrow, if not negative margins, and this bill creates more certainty of financial health and eliminates a potential unknown liability. Many hospitals have negative margins, and a 2% margin is outstanding in Wyoming in the current environment. Insurance companies in Wyoming have offered their support of this legislation. This bill allows a reasonable time frame for health insurers to review claims, question a possible mistake, and work with providers on claims. Fraud is not covered by this bill, and investigations and recourse of the law would not be impeded by this new statute. With that, I ask for your support of House Bill 15.
Thank you, Senator. Was there amendment read in on this?
Oh, amendment.
Okay,
No
okay.
amendment.
I had it down as one.
Question.
Question. Ready for the vote? All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion to adopt the Standing Committee of the Whole Amendment, or House Bill, which one are we on, 15? Which bill is it? Yeah, House Bill 15. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. House Bill 15 passed Committee of the Whole. Let's see, the next bill. For your consideration is House Bill 15. The reading clerk will read the House bill. That was, sorry, put it over here. Give it to you. There you go. I'll start all over. Let's see here. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, just take the next, okay, gotcha. House Bill number 35. Reading clerk will read the end of the bill.
House Bill 35, Limitation on Environmental Rulemaking, sponsored by the Minerals Committee, an act relating to environmental quality.
You've heard the reading of the House bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that to do so a favorable motion of this House Bill 30. And we have Senator Rothfuss.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, House Bill 35, Limitation on Environmental Rulemaking, came out of some efforts from the Regulatory Reduction Task Force during the interim and then came to the Minerals Committee. This legislation is a good little fact check that requires the Department of Environmental Quality to work through its existing rules and then contemplate among those rules whether any of those rules where we have primacy. So this is, for example, on a lot of EPA-related rules of the DEQ's 104 rules, 69 of those rules are associated with primacy programs such as AML, Air Quality Division, Land Quality Division, et cetera. To look through that rule set and decide circumstances where the state of Wyoming has more stringent rules in place than what the corresponding federal rule would require, and then investigate whether those are necessary rules to have in place. So it doesn't require that they be overturned. In fact, it specifically says that the council shall not promulgate rules more stringent than federal law, rules or regulations for primacy programs unless DEQ identifies the need for the rules or regulations beyond being more stringent than in the statement of the principal reasons. So it basically says if our Department of Environmental Quality is going to have a more stringent regulation, it has to have a specific justification for it and provide that justification or cede back to, through rule, the federal minimum rule requirement. And Mr. Chairman, that's effectively all this does. We see that specific language on page 3, lines 7 through 14, that they have to identify the need for that change. On page 3, line 16 through page 4, line 6, that's where the DEQ director consults with all of the regulated stakeholders to determine what rules should be reviewed pursuant to this act, and then provide a timeline for conducting that review, and then report to the Minerals Committee. On page 4, beginning on line 8 with section 2B, the Environmental Quality Council shall promulgate or repeal rules necessary to administer this act. Page 4, section 2C requires that the DEQ director review new and amended rules to comply with the act, and then it provides for an effective date. Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. I'm just wondering what promulgated this particular need for this legislation? Was there some issues that folks brought to the committee that perhaps the department was over-regulating or providing rules and regulations in excess of the federal program? So I just wondered, just a little history.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So some of these primacy acts that were alluded to, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, they say that, you know, the federal government can set the floor for what a certain standard might be, and states are always allowed to adopt more rigorous or more stringent standards. And so nationally, you hear that being maybe an issue in other places. So that kind of trickled into Wyoming, and we had a really good conversation. The good news is I don't think this is happening with great frequency. I think it's a little more theoretical. DEQ and others gave us some examples, though, of where they actually have a higher standard in regulation, but they're actually brought on by people in affected industries. So we heard about regulation of hydrogen fluoride, for example, where the standard's higher than what the federal government requires, but that the agricultural community asked for a more stringent standard because hydrogen fluoride was causing weight loss in cattle, and it was a real problem for their industry. So that's why we crafted the language in such a way that said unless the DEQ can articulate a reason why that standard is more stringent. I think in reality what happens in Wyoming is that if an affected industry hears about it, they contact the DEQ or EQC, they respond with a rulemaking, and if they don't do that, then it kind of trickles up to us. So I think there's a natural check on this, but this really, I think, codifies and just kind of alleviates some concerns out there that maybe are discussed on a more national level. So I hope that answers the Senator's question.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will just tack on that I am not familiar with any egregious circumstances over the 14 years I've been on the Minerals Committee, and very few even come to mind. I think we do this very well already, and as the good senator from Laramie County pointed out, the circumstances where we do have more stringent rules are justified, and so this provides through statute the appropriate means of allowance for that. But at the same time, we did something similar to this a while back where we actually had the work done to check. And I think some good outcomes came. And some of those, Mr. Chairman, were related to permit calendar and timing. And we ended up with some good legislation related to that as an outcome from it, where we were slowing down some permitting processes in an unnecessary way. Upon review, DEQ identified that and thought, all right, we don't necessarily need this many days here and this many days there. We can probably expedite this process. So I think it's a good exercise, even if it doesn't end up with a substantial amount of changes. It's not a bad thing for us to check, and I appreciate the work from the Regulatory Reduction Committee to bring this to our attention.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Dockstatter's motion to House Bill 35, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion passes. 35. The next bill for our consideration will back up to Senator Landon, House Bill 81. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 81, engrossed, Public Officer Training Amendments, sponsored by Representative Banks, an act relating to administration of the government.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Let me start by apologizing. I was going off of the little green list, and we had a change up on the electronic board. And yours truly just simply wasn't ready, so thanks for laying this back for a moment. I would move, Mr. Chairman, that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with a due pass recommendation on House Bill 81, Public Officer Training Amendments, and the good Senator Cooper has agreed to take this on the floor. So, Mr. Chairman, if you could call on Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 51, Public Officer Training Amendments. The source of this bill, early last summer, we started getting calls. I'm sure all of you probably got some from our municipalities, from our counties, from our special districts, being pretty upset about training requirements that were, that the Department of Audit felt had to be in place. And originally, the Department of Audit was bringing people either to Casper or Cheyenne for an 8-hour training program. And that included everybody that was in a public office. So if you were on a cemetery board, you still had to have this training. We felt that was a little excessive in our discussions with the Department of Audit. He felt like he needed changes to the statutes in order to do something different. We worked with him through the summer. We've got the training down to, a lot of it's online now. Takes anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hours. It's working pretty well. The original thought when we started talking about this is that this should just be people controlling the purse strings, actually who had a credit card or a check signing authority. But the general consensus seems to be that they would rather have everybody on these districts or boards or county commissioners or whoever it is receive this training, so they have more eyes looking, and if you see something, say something type mentality. And I guess I'm comfortable with that. So basically what we've done is we've asked him to, in statute, to pull in that training to make sure it's very directed at what we're looking for, fiscal responsibility for anybody in these positions. One of the provisions in the statute before was that they could remove that person from a board if they didn't have the training, and we removed that. Trying to remember what all the other provision that the House put in here was that training should be no more than 4 hours, and it can be completed on their personal time, but it doesn't have to be. So the result of all this through the summer is we've got a good training program all across the state for these officers. Groups that had their own training programs, such as municipalities or commissioners or conservation districts, have those training programs in place, and the director has the ability to approve those training programs, so they don't have to take redundant programs. They only have to take the program once. They don't have to take it every year, and that's pretty much it. It's nothing serious. It's a good bill. It just codifies where we're at right now with the Department of Audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cooper. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, there is a standing committee amendment, and I'd ask that that be read in at this time.
House Bill 81, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 2, line 21, delete.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the standing committee amendment and try to explain what took place in the committee room. Appreciate the description of the bill, and the senator did a good job. When you get to the bottom of page 2, that was an amendment that was put on the other side. Our committee felt like that was maybe a little too restrictive and just not necessary with the bill. I think the bill accomplishes what it sets out to do without restricting and saying, an arbitrary 4-hour time limit. So that's what the standing committee does. Amendment does. It just strips that language right back out of there and cleans up the bill. So I'd ask for your favorable consideration on the standing committee amendment.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Any discussion on the amendment? Ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 81, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment's passed.
We're back on the bill?
Back on the bill.
Okay.
Senator Land.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would be glad to answer any questions. There's some other co-sponsors on the bill. Otherwise, I'd ask for the question and hope you'll support the bill.
Question's been called. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little discussion on the effective date becoming immediate. I think that the Department of Audit would start probably moving in this direction, but you might, people who are maybe mid-course or midway through a training, I think having a little bit of, a few months to plan and maybe have that as July 1st, just so it's a clear start date and a clear end date. We're not catching someone in the middle. So, but I don't want to muck up this bill, but just a little discussion on the effective date.
Senator Barta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on this is actually work that's has been done by your Management Audit Committee over the last 3 or 4 years. And so some folks had some concerns about the training requirements, and that's what this bill is going to as a personal bill. All of these folks, the effective date of this bill does not change what is in current statute, and these officers have to have received their training by July 1st of this year. So there is already a timeline for officers to complete their training, and that's within the current fiscal year, by the end of the current fiscal year. So I don't think the effective date of this changes the requirement that's already in statute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Land.
Mr. Chairman, just simply regarding the training. The testimony in committee was the fact that many of these organizations out across, from cities and counties to other organizations, conduct their own training and are very good at it. And this auditing office can sign off on those and be fine. This was not a unanimous vote out of committee. It's a consideration for the Senate as to whether or not that's going to be good enough. You know, we talked a lot about fraud, and the fact is it does happen, Mr. Chairman, and there's always been a reason for why we want those who take care of the fiscal responsibilities on those districts and the county and the city and all across. There's a reason why this statute exists in the first place. But ultimately, the committee voted it out in favor, and we thought that the training could be taken care of in other ways. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To add a little bit to what the good chair said there, a lot of these committees are these public officers, if you will, are volunteers, and they're serving on a cemetery board or a dump board or whatever it may be. They don't have a lot of time to come to Cheyenne or Casper, somewhere like that, for training. So the idea of this was to facilitate local training for them. And I think it's been pretty well accepted across the training that's happened in the last 6 months here. I believe they trained in testimony something like 600 people in the last session they had, and it's working well. With that said, your favorable consideration, please.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm against the bill, primarily because I've seen this from the beginning of the need to provide this training. And as the senator from Campbell County indicated, the Management Audit Committee has been hearing updates from the Department of Audit, who is the state agency kind of responsible for unveiling this program. And I think at the very beginning, when the statute went into effect with the requirements for all of the government entities to undertake this training, it was the first time. And so there were a lot of processes to learn to make it efficient. Now, it's my understanding, based on, I think, testimony and committee meetings as recently as November, everyone feels pretty comfortable with the circumstances the Department of Audit has providing their training to other entities to help facilitate it. We have heard that argument that they're volunteers on a lot of these cemetery districts and small government entities, and you have to just kind of beg people to serve. And that is true, and we do have a lot of empathy for them, but what we've also observed is the likelihood of embezzlement when there's less training, less oversight, and even the smaller district. As we've just had these significant conversations about property taxes, a lot of these very small districts actually have some pretty decent budgets that they're receiving in those mills and revenues coming in. And so even though they're volunteers, the public trust of which they possess and their fiduciary obligations are still just as high, and the remedies needed to be in place for when we lose those. And so over the last number of years, we actually have seen a high number of embezzlements in our government entities from all sizes of districts. And so this bill having gone into effect recently, or this law, to be so quickly changed, I think out of maybe a knee-jerk reaction to a bad experience of having to come down to Cheyenne for the training, that one time on the very first beginning, which is no longer occurring, may be too big of a reaction in light of how it's working so well now. And so I'd hate to see us roll back those requirements, expose ourselves to less training, more embezzlement, in response to the initial implementation being so rigorous. So I'm against the legislation for that reason.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would, after hearing testimony, I would definitely be for this bill. Actually, when I read it the first time around, and I did talk to some of the elected officials in my neck of the woods, and I did have one commissioner that was a little cranky that he had to take this training. But I am serving on a board right now that, you know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they had some fraud, and someone ended up going to jail from that whole situation. And, you know, his question was, well, why, just exactly what the good senator from Thermopolis mentioned, that, you know, shouldn't it just be the treasurers? Unfortunately, a lot of these boards turn over every couple of years or so, and the treasurer that was there 2 years ago might not be the treasurer now. And so I believe, after serving on a board where there had been some improprieties many years ago, we all are very, very adamant about making sure that we really go over those financials with a fine-tooth comb. The other thing that I did ask about was that, you know, are there virtual possibilities to get that training, not just face-to-face? And there are, and that put my mind at ease. So they can do some of these trainings virtually. They can actually have them done by, I think, the municipalities do their own training when they have their conferences. There's a lot of different ways they can do it. It used to be, I guess, I used to have to go to Casper and Cheyenne to be able to get the training, and now there's all kinds of options out there for them to get the training. So on and for this bill.
Senator Kolb, then Senator Barr will be next. Senator Kolb.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit to add to the conversation that was mentioned about embezzlement with the small districts. And I can tell you from my experience, that's really about segregation of duties and not having enough folks on those districts to do that. And that invites embezzlement. Now, when it comes to training, I'll just throw something out to you. One of my constituents asked me where our training was. And apparently, oh, sorry. Once again, I'm not usually accused of being too soft, so I'll do my best to fix that. Did you hear the whole thing, what I was saying there? Did you kind of, sort of? All right, so where's the training for us? It was the next question because we impose that upon them. But I think that the level of training certainly varies the need with different groups, you know, ones that are more involved with government and ones that are small districts that probably, they do need it. And the report is, it's been very beneficial. It's made huge changes in their awareness of what the statutes are and what their requirements are as, say, a board or an improvement district, whatever it may be. I heard that it's a long process and it seems to be, you know, not of great benefit at times when it goes on. You know, it just, I would say it's just a lot. And what's the adequate amount? How much is adequate? How much do we need to get the message across to these small districts and, say, maybe even small counties, that they need to be following the statutes that maybe they weren't aware of? I think this bill addresses it in that I would make the argument that the first bit of law went a little too far, and this is kind of rolling it back a little bit. And I think it's going to be a probably a process to know what exactly that sweet spot is in training. So I'm supportive of this bill in that it lessens it. And if it comes up that it somehow is an inadequate amount of training, then we'll probably have to readjust slightly. But I think my gross takeaway is it's a bit too much. It's a bit more than what we really need. And maybe rolling it back is an appropriate thing to do at this time as this bill attempts to do. So on and for the bill.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a pretty small bill, but there's apparently a lot to say about it. So I want to clarify a couple of things. This was brought to us by our Department of Audit and other folks who were observing real concerns in the way things were being handled. And we took a carrot and stick approach. Please get some training, that's the carrot. The stick is, some of the bills you've already seen, is we're going to start withholding funds if you don't actually follow through and do your financials correctly. So that bill is already out of here. Now we're looking at modifying the carrot end of it, or trying to help these. To the point about whether legislators require have any training, well, I was on an appointed board, just like we're going to appoint folks as Senate, and as a Senate, and at least at the time that I went on that board, I was required to take a course, and it was a 2-day course of responsibilities that I had when I joined that particular board. Like I said, it was an executive branch board. So maybe we should think about that. But to the point of this bill, and there's only one part in the stricken language that I would point out to the body, and I'll bring an amendment to have a further discussion on. This is lines 3 and 4 on page 2. This is about the promulgation of rules that the department can do. This has been stricken. And so what the rules actually say is they actually give some folks a pass on taking the training. If you're a CPA, if you have certain or other training, these rules actually say you don't have to take the training. So what we do by striking that language and striking the ability to have these rules is we make more people have to take the training who are right now exempted from the training. So I just point that out to you, and I'll probably bring an amendment that it'll make it not a shall, it'll be a may promulgate rules for exceptions to this paragraph. So it's clear about what the purpose of those rules would be. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on and for this bill. I think the intent of the training is still there. I think that it's just good practice, good government practice that we continue with this process. But I do want to point out that one thing that I'll bring through the body in a second reading amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion? Question? All those in favor of Senator Landon's House Bill of 81, please say aye. Those opposed? No. Let's say, the chair says that it passed. So House Bill 81 has passed the committee of... Okay. Division's been called. All those in favor, please stand. (17 ayes). Motion, House Bill 81 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 25. Will the reading clerk read in the bill?
House Bill 25, Medicaid Third-Party Payer Conditions, sponsored by the Labor Committee, an act relating to the Wyoming Medical Assistance and Services Act.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rises to report, they do so with an aye vote on House Bill 25, Medicaid third-party payer conditions. For explanation of the bill, I turn front and center to the good senator from Campbell County.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill is really just a clarification of some timelines within our Medicaid agency. And if you'll go just to the middle of the page, lines 12 through 16 is the first adjustment to the statute. You go on to line 15, we have this, you have to have a claim submitted within 3 years. Well, right now, the way the current statute is you look at, there's that underlined language on line 12. If you don't get the claim till year 2.5, it makes it pretty tight to actually turn it around by the end of that 3-year period. So what this does, and just so we're clear, Medicaid is the payer of last resort, the payer of last resort. So private insurance, all the other payers have to pay first, have to have a chance of, are obligated to pay first, and if none of them pay, then it's Medicaid. So what this does is just put a timeline on those, by when the state says, are you going to pay this bill, they have to respond within a timely manner and say, yes, we're responsible for this, we cover it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, ladies and gentlemen, is on further down in the page, has to do with the prior authorization. As you know, we've done a lot of work, and there's been a lot of good work by folks in this body about prior authorization. And so the other thing that this says is, look, just because you didn't get you can't not pay the bill because someone else didn't get a prior authorization when they should have been the payer. So this is just, you can't pass the buck because you didn't do this. Really, I think they're quite simple, but they actually, in my view, Mr. Chairman, will hopefully reduce potentially reduce the spend out of Medicaid, because we'll get the right people to pay the right things in a more timely manner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Is there a question? All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 25, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? House Bill 25 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for consideration is House Bill 54. Will the reading clerk read in the bill?
House Bill 54, Wyoming Reads Day, sponsored by Representative Washut, an act relating to legal time and holidays.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report to do so with a recommendation that House Bill 54 do pass, and I yield to Senator Landon for an explanation of this good little House bill.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thanks to the good education chairman. Mr. Chairman, right off the bat, I would ask for a little bit of latitude. This is actually a bill about a couple of folks, and we normally don't use proper names on the floor, but since the bill is about them, with your leave, I would incorporate them into the description.
You're allowed.
And as a matter of fact, thank you, Mr. Chairman, as a matter of fact, you're friends with them too, and have known them. Folks, this little bill, you've probably read it, but I want to give you a little background. Back in 1996, Casper had a dynamic educator named Sue Jorgensen, who loved kids, she loved reading. Well, tragically, she died in a car crash. And her grieving husband, John, honored his late wife by establishing a foundation in recognition of her commitment to children and literacy and books. And the foundation began giving away beautiful illustrated books to every first grade child in the Trona County School District that year. This became known as the Casper Cares, Casper Reads project. Teachers, school administrators, and parents joined in to make it a huge success. In 2006, the Casper Cares and Casper Reads program was taken to a new level, expanding statewide for the first time as Wyoming Reads. The program has since grown to include celebrations in all of Wyoming's 23 counties, distributing books to thousands of first graders in the spring. As the 25th anniversary of this amazing initiative draws to a close, it is fitting that the Wyoming legislature recognize John and Sue Jorgensen, and that's what this bill does. And a lot of citizens in Wyoming who were dedicated to this effort as well. And this would place some importance on early childhood literacy by establishing the third Tuesday in May of each year as Wyoming Reads Day. The day shall be appropriately observed by the public schools in the state, by the state and local governments and organizations around the state. The celebrations to advance the cause of childhood literacy and encouraging early enthusiasm for reading could take place throughout the state. Mr. Chairman, that's what the bill does. I will add that I had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time with John Jorgensen. Along with this work that he did, he served as the president of that college foundation board up in the center part of the state for better than 25 years. Many of the buildings, that college has benefited from 25 different buildings that were made possible by private support. And John Jorgensen played a huge role in many of those. And I was fortunate enough to work side by side as we managed to put a few facilities in place. But so much more we could talk about. Be glad to answer any question. That's the bill. Hope you'll support it.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to even rise on this, but I do have a concern. You know, our Constitution prohibits us from writing special legislation that just affects a handful of citizens. We talk about what that means all the time, but I am a little nervous about calling out private citizens in something other than a resolution. You know, I certainly think resolutions are appropriate places where we can express the will of the body to recognize certain individuals who have done extraordinary things for our state. But I get really nervous when we start having their specific names of individuals, especially those currently with us, codified in our statute. So just a little discussion on that particular piece, but support literacy, support reading. I think kids should read all the time, but I'm a little nervous about this one.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, on and for this legislation. Mr. Chairman, one of the things we've learned on your Senate Education Committee, reading is absolutely key to academic success for the children of the state. And this is a private effort that has done a great deal of public benefit to getting kids reading. One of the problems that we do see is many kids don't have any books in their home. This directly works on that. And indirectly, a big thing it does is it tells the kids that those of us who are adults think that reading is very important. So it has two benefits. Mr. Chairman, I don't think there's any possible constitutional question here. We're not conveying any personal benefit on any person. We're trying to recognize some very good work that has been done for the benefit of the state of Wyoming. And I think there's no possibility of any difficulty here. So, Mr. Chairman, on and for the bill.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, on and for the bill. I agree that there's nothing that's going to be brought forth to that individual that started this. We're talking about naming Wyoming Reads Day, not John Jorgensen Day. So the Wyoming Reads is all over the state now. It is not in Natrona County or any specific county. I heard earlier that all 23 counties have a form of this. Whether they're getting books done or what they're doing, I don't know. John has done an awful lot in Natrona County, but his movement to do those books, he did himself the first year. And they're bound books. They're not paperbacks. They're nice books that the student can pick from. And then his foundation took over, and then the libraries took over, and it is way bigger than it was first started. He started it in our I don't know if I can say this, Rotary Club, and we helped him with it in the beginning, but he didn't need any help once it got going. So I think it's Wyoming Reads Day. The background is John Jorgensen, but not the honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So years ago, the University of Wyoming has a literacy research center and clinic, and this was a priority for our prior First Lady to encourage literacy. And so they had an advisory board, and I had the privilege of working on that advisory board for a lot of years. And that former First Lady even established a Leaders in Literacy Award. And when we looked at some of the applications that we received, I can tell you there's some really amazing people all over the state of Wyoming doing work to improve early literacy. It's awesome, and we should be encouraging all of those folks to do that. I think my concern is that when we start bringing individuals' names and we start putting them in the statute books, we are conferring somewhat of a benefit. We're providing recognition for two individuals. And that's where I'm concerned. Then, in the future years, are we opening Pandora's box where all of a sudden my constituents will say, I do a lot for literacy, why don't I have my own Wyoming Reads Day? Or imagine how this could spiral. So that's my concern, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to disparage this couple and this family. I think that they're probably very deserving of this. That's my caution, is I'm aware of lots and lots of people who are doing a lot of really great work in early literacy and literacy in the state. So thank you. We vote your conscience on this one, but I think we'll start seeing more and more of these bills popping up in the future.
Thank you. Further discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 54, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? House Bill 54 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 66. Will the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 66 engrossed, firefighter cancer screening benefits, sponsored by Representative Brown, an act relating to labor and employment. That is House Bill 66 engrossed.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure? Senator Baldwin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they do so with an affirmative vote on House Bill 66, firefighter cancer screening benefits. And for explanation, I will go ahead and explain this. If I could have the amendment read in, please.
House Bill 66, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 3, delete.
You've heard the reading of the bill. The amendment. Yeah, go ahead.
Back to me.
Missed that part.
I'll go ahead and move that amendment. We won't vote on it yet, but I will move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 66 and do an explanation of the bill and then the amendment, if I could. What this bill does, Senators, and some of you may remember who were here in 2017 that we passed a bill, or Senate file, I believe, or bill, I don't remember, that was presumptive cancer for firefighters. Those who were on the committee at that time will remember the committee report and the committee testimony. It was quite an emotional committee meeting. We had a survivor of a firefighter who had died from occupational cancer come in from the city in the center of the state. And in a good way, we passed that bill, and that was very important. If you read through this bill is built on that same foundation, and it goes back to a lot of language in that bill. What this bill does is allow volunteer and professional paid firefighters to receive annual cancer screenings. Now you may say, why would you want to do that? Matter of fact, the committee asked some of those questions. The facts are this: firefighters are 10% more likely to get a cancer, to contract a cancer, than the general population. Firefighters are 15% more likely to die from that cancer once they contract it. We could go into long medical explanations and long medical discussions, and we won't because you hate me talking medicine, I know. But the fact is early cancer screenings are long-term benefits. They prevent death. They prevent large medical bills. They prevent family suffering, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact is, if we can get these firefighters in for these annual screenings, catch a cancer earlier, not only will we protect more lives, save more lives, we're going to save their time with their families. We're going to preserve our public workers that are out there fighting fires and protecting us. We're going to save that. And the thing that I don't even like to include is we're gonna save money for the state. We're gonna save workman's comp money. Instead of going on these extensive treatment programs because the cancer's caught late, let's catch it early and get it treated and take care of it up front. That is what the bill does. And the bill has a provision in it that this won't count against, or it won't be included in the employer's experience rating. The side to that is that it will go into it may be put into the base rate calculation when in effect actually lowers the cost to workman's comp. So ultimately, this will end up with a lower cost to the state of Wyoming and to workman's comp, and potentially could save the state a ton of money because we're treating these patients earlier. I was asked in committee when I testified on the other side of this building about the bill when I thought people should be screened for cancer. My answer is not very popular, but I said 20 years old. Frankly, I think we should be catching cancers earlier, not just in firefighters, but in the general population. We wait too long. Firefighters in particular, they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? They all think they're tough. I don't. I used to when I was younger, but I don't anymore. But the fact is, they're tough guys. And sometimes you can't drag those guys in. And this might be a motivation to get these guys in and get them treated, or guys and gals, and get them treated and found earlier with cancer and benefit our entire state. Thank you, and I encourage your aye vote.
Thank you. We're on the amendment.
I'm sorry. See, I got so excited I sat down. So the amendment's pretty straightforward. It's 3 grammatical corrections. We changed Wyoming's to Wyoming to say Wyoming workman's comp. And on page 3, if you look down the row, the original bill, or the engrossed bill that we got, says female breast cancer. Some of you may remember we had a colleague on the other side of the building here, a male with breast cancer. So breast cancer doesn't just happen in females, so we took the female out to include all firefighters, not just females, on breast cancer screening. And that's the amendment. With that, I did move it. We're good. So I would ask first for an aye vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none? All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion to adopt Standing Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 66, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The amendment is passed. Back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just real quickly, I wanted to rise in support of this bill. We referenced, a few years ago, a bill that we ran here in the Senate, and I just wanted to recall for the Senate what that was all about, that presumptive disability bill. For our firefighters, I was really proud to carry that bill, and proud that the Senate went with me on that. That was a nationally recognized event. People from all over the country reached out to us to find out how we did it and how we went about identifying some of the language in that bill. Very proud of it. I just hope we stay on the front edge stay number 1 in this area. I really salute those who have sponsored this bill. I think it's the right thing to do. It dovetails nicely into that other bill that the Senate created. I just hope we stay on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the good senator just reminded me of something that I forgot to bring up. The origin of this bill, as a matter of fact, is very similar to that bill from 2017. This bill was brought to a member of the other body from a firefighter here in Laramie County that is deceased and did die from an occupational cancer. And that's where the origin of this bill came from, very similar to the one in 2017. And we heard her in committee. Again, very strong person, gave a very emotional testimony. So with that, please vote aye.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to do our due diligence, that's coming out of the Workman's Comp Fund. We're just talking back here, we think that's a pretty healthy fund, but if you had any information on that for second reading, we'd appreciate it.
Senator Baldwin.
Actually, to the good senator, thank you. If you look on the fiscal note, he does detail that it won't come out of their experience, but it will add to the fiduciary, which we were told would actually lower the cost. would actually reduce the cost of workman's comp because it broadened the base.
Further discussion? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and it seems to me that we also just dealt with legislation to reduce workers' comp rates because we were so fiscally sound that we collected too much money. So this is a very sound fund.
Further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 66, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? House Bill 66 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 13. Will the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 13, Flow-Through Pools Exemption, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee, an act relating to public health and to safety.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 13 do pass, and for an explanation, I call on Senator Kolb.
Senator Kolb.
Mr. Chairman, this bill is exempting flow-through pools from the Public Pool and Spa Health and Safety Act. Now, I'll read what a flow-through pool is for folks that might not know. A flow-through pool means an artificial or partially artificial pool that depends on the natural flow of water to maintain adequate water quality. This was presented as a regulatory reduction issue with the Department of Health in that they thought their belief is they don't need this. We have very, very few flow-through pools in the state of Wyoming, and they don't see the need for having this regulation in place anymore. It was archaic. So that's the choice in front of us today, is to basically reduce regulations, and I guess I'll promote the Regulatory Reduction Task Force on the work they did to come up with this, and that's why it's in front of us today, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor of Senator Steinmetz's motion when Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Senator French, I left you out there. All those in favor of Senator French's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation for House Bill 13, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. House Bill 13 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 12. Will the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 12, Wyoming Dairy Marketing Act repeal, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee, an act relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 12 do pass. And for an explanation, I call on the good Senator Steinmetz.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We bring to you today the Dairy Marketing Act repeal, which is another good work of your Regulatory Reduction Task Force. I believe you were on that, Mr. Chairman, as well. So thank you for that. The Dairy Marketing Act of 1971 is obsolete. There is now a federal act. It is an opt-in act. There is only one operator in the state of Wyoming that would be eligible for that. And so the federal act has replaced that. It's an opt-in act, and so this is no longer necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator French's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 13. 12, sorry. House Bill 12, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? House Bill 12 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 34. Will the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 34, Solid Waste Municipal Cease and Transfer Funding, sponsored by the Minerals Committee, an act relating to the prioritization of municipal solid waste facilities cease and transfer projects. Correction, House Bill 34.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the House, or when the Senate Committee of the Whole rise to report, that they do so with a positive on this House Bill, what is it, 34?
34.
And to explain the bill is the, Senator Cooper.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senators, this is House Bill 34, the Solid Waste Municipal Cease and Transfer Funding, our old friend, AKA the dump bill. So what this bill does is it authorizes previously appropriated funds for the closure or transfer of development closure or transfer of different waste facilities across the state. Get to the right page here. Originally, I believe there were excuse me. Originally, I think there were 65 projects on this bill. We're down to 16. One of them is a carcass management program. The others are, let me see here. There's 7 transfer stations left and 9 closure projects on the current bill. Again, no new appropriations. We're just moving forward with the program that's been in place for many years. With that, I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
Any discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with favorable recommendation of House Bill 34, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? House Bill 34 is passed Committee of the Whole. Senator Landon.
Chairman, may I have quick privilege of the floor, please?
Yes, you may.
Somebody said no. Mr. Chairman, there's a good friend sitting up above me here that hails from our hometown, you and I. Our good friend Anna Kinder is the director of the public health of Natrona County. She and her husband John is with her today. Would you please help me to welcome them to the Senate? Right up here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see, where are we? Well, yeah. We just did 34. Go to the, okay. Let's see. Pardon me? Okay, yeah. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 33. Will the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 33, Mining Operations Blasting Requirements, sponsored by the Minerals Committee, an act relating to environmental quality.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 33 do pass. And to explain this good little bill, Senator Jones.
Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, this bill is at industry's request to ensure their specific expectations through statute that ensures efficient, safe, sound explosives use. This is for non-coal operations, and as we speak today, our statutes do not cover blasting for non-coal mineral extraction. With the NFPA, the Department of Homeland Security, the WYDEQ that protects homeowners, landowners, mine operators, and the public through rulemaking expectations. And this helps create procedures that will comply with state and federal law. The state of Wyoming has an abundant deposit of rare earths, which now present viable opportunities for extraction. A recent discovery of 2.34 billion metric tons of rare earth minerals near Wheatland is just one of the many additional nickel and cobalt. There's copper in South Carbon County, uranium and gold in the state as well. At this moment, about 95% of the world's rare earth minerals are used in everyday lives, defense systems, emerging technologies, and most of it comes from foreign countries. This bill authorizes one full-time position with the DEQ to manage this ever-increasing workload that the DEQ does not have the bandwidth to execute in a timely manner. And there has been a little bit pushback on this full-time employee, but there actually is a pretty large skill set with this. It's an engineer. They need 7 to 10 years of experience. I have like a giant thing on what their qualifications are, but some of them include, some of the things they will do is conduct site evaluations. They have to design and develop blasting plans and procedures. They're gonna select and oversee the use of appropriate blasting techniques, and it goes on and on. But anyway, that's pretty much the gist of this bill, and it's to protect mostly landowners and actually the mine operators as well.
Any discussion? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess two questions. The first one is on the appropriation and the employee. It looks like for this current biennium, there's a $500,000 appropriation, and then it gets knocked back by 100,000 to 402. So I'd be curious to know what that $100,000 difference is, equipping an office or whatever, just some discussion on that. And I guess the other thing is, if we need this bill, that means there must be no regulations for non-coal blasting at this time. Is that accurate? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the appropriation, we went over that in committee, and that difference that you'll see is so that initial year DEQ person will be able to purchase equipment such as seismic equipment, as well as a vehicle to transport that equipment. So they'll be driving out across Wyoming, and that's why you see the appropriation decrease the following year. And my understanding, and I could be wrong, so committee members, if I'm not remembering it, is there aren't rules governing some of these additional new permits. We heard testimony that there are currently 50 mines, but there's just a lot of interest in lithium, rare earth, gold, copper, et cetera. And we received testimony that there are 1,000 new mining permits currently in the hopper. And our federal partners in the Bureau of Land Management, a federal agency, they've actually received 4,700 new claims. So we anticipate that this is going to continue to grow in Wyoming and interest for this, so we're trying to get ahead of it and making sure we've got some parameters for blasting operations. And you'll see the bulk of the language that we're adding is really delegating some rulemaking to the EQC. You'll see on page 4 that they're going to be developing rules and the parameters for that. So starting on page 5, standards and procedures to ensure that the explosives are used only in accordance with state and federal law. We want them to look at applicable fire codes, requirements for operators to maintain not less than 3 years, to make their logs available for public inspection, and just some other things there. So, Mr. Chairman, this is brought to us by industry. I think we're all recognizing that we want to do this right as these mining claims are being processed and looked at, so would encourage an aye vote.
Further discussion? Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious, I look at page 6, item B, damage to public and private property. That has to be significant risk, far beyond what's appropriated here. I just would like someone to speak on that issue if they're blasting anywhere near private or public property. Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the language that you'll see on page 6, you have to go back to page 5, Romanet 4, starting on line 18. Here, we're asking the DEQ in their rulemaking to establish the types of explosives and detonation equipment to be used at the site, timing, frequency of blasts, those kinds of things, to prevent, you'll see that language on line 5, or excuse me, page 5, line 21, to prevent injury to persons, to prevent damage to the public and private property outside the permit area, to prevent adverse impacts on any underground mine, to prevent adverse impacts on water, et cetera. So read together, that's what the plan's supposed to do.
Anyone else? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, just to pile on that, we heard in our committee was that there was not any regulations on the other mines that on this blasting. So this is new for the small operators and all these other operators like gold and that do not have to comply to regulations, and they will now have to comply and have to meet those requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. No more discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 33, say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 33 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 74. Will the reading clerk please read it in?
House Bill 74, Public Health Nursing Budget Request, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to public health and safety.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rise to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 74 do pass. And to explain this is Senator Nethercott.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the purpose of this bill, good senators, is to provide equity for our contract public health nurses in the state. And so in your budget bill, the Department of Health's contract public health nurses compensation was increased, and that was done through the 900 series, or I mean through the 100 series, but our county public health nurses are paid in the 900 series. And so all the other state health nurses will be receiving public health nurses an increase, and our county public health nurses are not. And so this bill is an attempt to keep the funding model the same with our county public health nurses. And so there are 4 counties that have exercised the option to have public health nursing, and those are Laramie, Natrona, Sweetwater, and Teton are the counties using the model. The counties operate with an MOU between the state and the county. The MOU requires the state to pay 65% and the county to pay 35%. The dollar amount at the time the MOU begins is then frozen, and that's how those nurses are paid. And so this bill goes to correct that issue. There's no money in this bill, but there will be a cost moving forward in order to provide that equity with those county public health nurses with those state health nurses. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions. That's the purpose of the bill and what the bill does.
Discussion, questions been called? All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 74, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. House Bill 74 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for consideration is House Bill 83. Will the reading clerk please read in the bill?
House Bill 83 engrossed, Public Retirement Actuarially Determined Contributions, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to public employee retirement.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 83 do pass. And to give you a sterling explanation of this great little bill is Senator Nethercott.
Prepare yourselves.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prepare yourselves, good senators, for a sterling presentation. I'm feeling nervous about the expectations here. Good senators, House Bill 83 is work of the interim of the Appropriations Committee for actuarially determined contributions to the retirement fund. And so as you've heard with the previous retirement bills, we are asking you and have asked you to increase the contribution amount both for the employee and the employer. And the employer in this case is the state and the other government entities within the state that participate in our retirement plan. And the way that we have been doing that historically is really on an ad hoc basis when the WRS comes and tells us, hey, we're feeling pretty nervous about how well-funded the fund is, and we need to make these contributions. That creates a real hardship, both on the employees and on the state in understanding how to make sure that the fund is adequately funded and it is timely funded in a way to make sure that we can do things like reduce employee contributions, and maybe someday, in about 35 years, we could provide a COLA to some of those retirees, but that's a long way out. So this bill is what's considered the gold standard when it comes to pension funds and how they should be managed for actuarial determinations. So the actuaries who help us determine whether or not the fund is fully funded, they are very, very excited about this bill. You should hear them talk about it in the PowerPoint presentations. But what it does in a nutshell is it increases the contribution by a rate adjustment of not more than half a basis point every 2 years on July 1st of the even numbered years. That will take place by the estimates through about July 1 of 2028, when things should really stabilize. And we won't have, in conjunction with the other work that we've done here in this legislative session, and there likely will not need to be any other increases in contributions for a period of time, an unknown amount, but they do believe that the fund at that time will be significantly more stable and on its way to being fully funded. Again, rates can't increase by more than the 50 basis points in any given 2-year period, so it does provide that predictive measure that both the state and the employees hopefully can sustain. Rates can't be reduced until the fund is at least 99% funded. Again, that's the goal for us to reach that. The estimation is we'll reach that about 2048. At that point in time, then we can start considering COLAs or employee reductions in their contribution amounts. Again, good senators, that's the bill. The rationale is for the plan to stay on the path for the next 25 years. We've had these retirement bills in the last number of years. They've failed over and over and again. So it's really hard to make sure that fund is fully funded. And so this kind of eliminates that need to do those ad hoc contributions that can have a pretty startling effect sometimes on employees and on the state's budget. So this again is the gold standard. Right now, the facts bearing on the situation is that the current rate is 18.62 which is about 2% less than what the actuaries recommend. So we're trying to achieve that result. Just a side note, good senators, the goal for the fund is to have a return rate of about 6.8%. It's a pretty good return. The fund is performing well, but again, we want to make sure it's fully funded and we are responsible so that our retirees have a safe and secure retirement fund of which they have contributed to. So I'm happy to stand for questions. I'll look forward to your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Senator Higgs.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, it talks about using an estimated administrative expense of the officially adopted actuarially assumptions. And so, you know, historically, the problem that we've had is the actuaries always have done this when we've done these and looked at these, and it's all based on the assumptions. And if you assume that the rate of return is 8% like it was 5 years ago, and then we never get it, it still shows it's actuarially fine. So through the JAC, they had to come back and say that's not a realistic assumption of 8%, and then we've reduced that down. So how do we get an actuary? That's the question. It's just to come back and take a realistic assumption of what that rate of return is over that 30-year horizon, instead of just pick a number, because it seems like experience that since I've been here 14 years, they always pick a number that's much higher than the actual rate of return, or marginally higher. But when you project that out 30 years, it doesn't change. You know, 15 years ago, we were about 74% actuarially sound on this, and that's about where we're at today. And that comes back to those assumptions. And so what changes with this that's different than what we've currently been doing with the actuaries?
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In essence, it provides an infusion of funds into the plan in order to meet the expectations. And so there were this bill and the Senate file that passed out of this chamber provide that infusion of funds to restore it by 2%. And so it's that 2% increase over time, over 30 years, which then gets it fully funded. Of course, there's a number of factors that could prevent that from happening, or it could happen sooner, of course. And that's why it's important that that actuarially determined number happens annually. It happens on the July 1st of the even numbered year. And so they're reevaluating their assumptions every other year on July 1st, hoping to keep a close eye on that. And then it comes up in that way. So I think what's different now is this infusion of monies into the fund. For anybody participating in the fund is solid, retirement system is doing well, but this is long-term projections to make sure it stays fully funded.
Senator Rothman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do have a question about the participation. So assuming that it changes by 50 basis points, how is that broken down between the employer and the employee's share? Maybe that's in there. I may have missed it. I'm sorry if I did.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it is in the bill, and I'll point to the page number. It's page 7 of the bill, and what I'm going to inquire about is that's where it's located. How is that different from what's currently being done, or what our historical patterns have been? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does not change any historical pattern. And so the percentage of the state employee contribution and the state contribution will remain the same. That's approximately 50-50, a little bit different, but approximately 50-50. That difference is the status quo. If you're not a state employee, but you are a government entity that participates in the plan, that depends on what your plan participation is. So there's a number of cities and counties, school districts that participate in the retirement plan. Each of them have a different offering to their employees. Some fund all of the in-contribution, and some do a different variation of a split. All of that is intended to stay the same. And the bill is so long, I would just say, and appears complicated because that percentage and that actuarially determined calculation has to be changed throughout the code. So it makes the bill seem more complicated than perhaps it really is.
Further discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 83, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion has passed. HB 83 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 138. Will the reading clerk? Oop. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee of the whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Oh, hell. Oops. Oops.
Reading clerk will read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 15, do pass. House Bill 35, do pass. House Bill 81, engrossed, do pass amended. House Bill 25, do pass. House Bill 54, do pass. House Bill 66, engrossed, do pass amended. House Bill 13, do pass. House Bill 12, do pass. House Bill 34, do pass. House Bill 33, do pass. House Bill 74, do pass. House Bill 83, do pass. Senator Ide, Chairman.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
Thanks, Cole.
Motion's passed.
Forgot about that part.
What? Senator Landon.
Mr. President, pursuant to Senate Rule 1210, having voted on the prevailing side, I move for immediate reconsideration of Senate File 51, unlawful dissemination of misleading synthetic media.
Thank you. Motion is non-debatable. Chief Clerk will call the roll, and this vote will just be for whether we go to reconsideration or not.
For reconsideration of Senate File 51, Anderson? No. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Excused. Boner? No. Bouchard? Excused. Brennan? No. No. Case? Aye. Aye. Cooper? No. No. Dockstader? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Excused. Kolb? No. Landon?
Aye.
Aye. Larson? Excused. McEwen? Excused. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Excused. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Excused. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closed. Anderson? No to aye. No to aye. Cooper? No to aye. Hicks, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. For reconsideration, 17 aye, 7 no. 7 excused.
By your vote, Senate File 51 has been brought up for reconsideration. We are now back on Senate File 51, and we'll vote on the bill. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 51, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Whitman excused. Boner? No. Brennan, Bouchard excused. Brennan? No. No. Case? Aye. Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski excused. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson excused. McCune excused. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar excused. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Excused. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 51, 17 aye, 7 no, 7 excused.
By your vote, Senate File 51 has passed the Senate upon reconsideration. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move the Senate stand adjourned until 9:30, Wednesday, February 28th, 9:30.
Are there any announcements? Senator Scott.
Mr. President, your committee number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. downstairs, room 110, the normal room. The bill to be considered will be House Bill 166, engrossed education savings accounts.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to hear one bill, House Bill 48, regulation of surgical abortions. That'll be in room 6 and online.
Senator French.
Your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet Thursday. That's Thursday, February 29th, 8 a.m. in the Capitol Extension Room 6 and online to consider House Bill 104, the Omnibus Water Bill Planning.
Senator Landon.
Mr. President, your Committee 1 Judiciary will meet tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in W4 and online to consider House Bill 31, engrossed peace officers' records and reporting, House Bill 30, Controlled Substances Act, possession amendments, and if time permits, we will take up that third bill, given the change in time up here on the floor. House Bill 29, engrossed cold case database and investigations, we may have to carry over till Friday. Thank you.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, will meet upon noon recess tomorrow, February 28th, in room W2 and online to consider House Bill 86, vehicle lien amendments.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Minerals Committee 9 will meet Wednesday, February 28th on the noon recess, Capitol Extension Room 4. Here are the following bills. House Bill 141, State Land, Oil, and Gas Leases Operator Requirement. House Bill 145, Open Banking Amendments. House Joint Resolution 3, House Joint 3, engrossed support for local input in federal rulemaking. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, your favorite committee, Appropriations Number 2, will meet Wednesday, February 28th, 2024, at 6 a.m. in the State Capitol Room A301. What? Oh, did I misread that? I guess it's upon noon recess, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, State Capitol Room E301 and online to consider the following bills. HB 67 engrossed, Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund Administration 2. Thank you.
Heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Senate stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. Wednesday, February 28th.
But